I have been lucky enough to have had a couple different eras of falling in love with Tomb Raider as a series. In my childhood, the classics dominated a lot of my time and energy, and made me a lover of puzzle platformers. But as I transitioned into my teen years, I remember my focus being pulled away from the genre to focus on serious parts of life, or other gaming genres. That is, until somewhere along the way, I had the time and the enthusiasm to refocus back onto the series, and funnily enough, that was when Tomb Raider Anniversary had dropped. So it was actually very exciting to see a trailer or an advert for Tomb Raider Anniversary which emphasized the fact that it was a remake of the first classic in the series. And so I went onto the internet to see what I could see for the game. A demo had been available. When I first got into Tomb Raider, it was through a demo of Tomb Raider 2. So it was very much like I was back in my childhood, except now I was a teenager. Anniversary was my first reintroduction to the series, and with the resurgence of ancient Tomb Raider popularity, I've been thinking about some of the things I've loved most about that revisit to put all of my thoughts down about the levels of these two very different but beloved imaginings of the classic adventure.
You have to go back to your past. And this time, things will be different.
Both games open similarly, showing scenes of Natla being blasted free from her ancient underground crystal stasis. We then cut to a Calcutta cafe, which has drastically different mood lighting between the two iterations. The markedly more dark atmosphere of the original features Lara wearing her trademark sunglasses, which she clearly needs with all the blinding light she's in. Larson approaches the two Laras for a rather clumsy attempt at flirting, by saying he wants her to shoot him like he's one of her endangered species. Original Tomb Raider gives this scene some extra humor, what with Natla telling Larson to shut up,
Bam.
and having someone drop dollar bills over her while she's in the Zoom call. But Lara's not impressed. Original Natla manages to entice Lara to go find the Scion by saying it's a totally dangerous mission and Lara might totally get killed trying to do it. Whereas Anniversary Natla appeals to Lara's vested interest in the artifact itself in a bit more of a professional fashion. Either way, Lara's like, say less.
This is a game you've played before.
The first level of Lara's first debut has always been a fairly comfortable introduction to her adventures, arguably the best for new players. However, there is a marked difference we notice right out the gate, in that what was solely a cinematic FMV in the original Tomb Raider 1 is now made playable in Anniversary as part of a tutorial. For further understanding as to why this was the case, we can refer to the game commentary.
The whole thing was leading up to sort of the whole wolf extravaganza that happens, where it was kind of the big reveal of Lara Croft. And obviously some of that wasn't really appropriate anymore. People know who Lara was, so it enabled us to actually be able to show Lara in the intro, in the foyer in Calcutta, and obviously we didn't have to go quite so crazy with the wolf bit with the big towels flying off of her and stuff.
This decision has led to one of the various points in the story where Anniversary adds gameplay where there was none in the original. Instead of the walk up the mountain to reach the ruins, the player is allowed to do some basic traversal. You can even chat with your guide for a bit.
Mira, ya llegamos.
Before he presumably gets his throat ripped out. The choice of making this section gameplay can be met with mixed results. On one hand, you get a few more moments of playtime to run about in the snow, which is a type of area unique from what's present in the rest of the game. On the other hand, we lose the vibe that this is a mysterious introduction to the badass adventurer Lara Croft. As explained by our good developers, it was assumed in 2006 that Lara is well known by the world at large, so a grand unveiling of Miss Croft, guns blazing, may have been thought to be less impactful, but personally I would disagree with this notion. This isn't a huge deal, but vibes are important. whether it's a first time or something that's long been known or spoiled. Again, this isn't huge to me personally. The only thing I think was a big mistake was to not have Lara wear her trademark towel for this section. While it would provide her almost no additional warmth and would technically be as pointless as her cutting this rope that she's holding, additional outfits are cool, and I'm rather sad that this silly cloak has not made a return in anything other than maybe Shadow of the Tomb Raider, if you want to call that a reference. After having entered the caves, it's nice to note the differences not only between the original and Anniversary, but between them and the remastered version as well. The little pockets of lighting and snow which Anniversary has added, and how the remasters take inspiration from some of those sensible additions. A little detail that Anniversary chose to add for some reason is the ability to deactivate these dart traps in the opening hallways. It's strange in that it doesn't really reward the player beyond making sure they don't lose a bit of health, but in so doing it may have robbed a first-timer the joy of learning to roll effectively. These opening corridors bring up a point that will be a constant in the comparison between these games, and that is the perception of space. When you look at a lot of the areas in Anniversary, some can feel quite smaller than the original, when proportionally they are. But there's also a phenomenon where spaces in Anniversary are proportionally larger than in the original, yet the use of space and geometry in the different games give off the opposite impression. This area in Anniversary seems to have a bit more going on in it, leading to a secret, whereas the original requires a fairly simple jump. However, as we know, maneuvering Lara in the original is a more complex task than in her more modern iterations. The effort one puts into these secrets may well end up being the same in terms of difficulty.
So I remember when we were first putting together the design for Tomb Raider, and I found that it was pretty disturbing how many games, how much there was of killing in games. Basically, so many people killing each other mindlessly. You know, you walk up to some chap and just because they're from a different country, you can gun them down, and that seems to be perfectly reasonable. So in TR1, I felt like, apart from the fact that I didn't think we could do very good humans at the time, like other human enemies, it seemed to me like a much nicer thing to do to have the enemies be animals, sort of, you know, vicious animals like bats and rats and things.
Which is ironic because I think now most people would consider killing animals way crueler than killing people.
It is, yeah. I mean, pretty much, the worst thing about it is, of course, they're all endangered species. None of this occurred to me at the time. To be honest with you, I just thought, great, we're not killing humans hardly at all. What a great selling point.
One of the things I've always loved about the Tomb Raider games was in fact the decision to make dangerous animals a main threat. It added to a realistic vibe, while also making things far more unsettling. This aspect is something that I always want for newer Tomb Raiders, and yet it doesn't always pan out that way. We see more of the lighting and space differences as we proceed further, with Anniversary adding in a secret in this large room. The room beyond these levers now differ. The original gives us a room adjacent to the hallway near the end of the level, blocked by a fence, and we must now proceed to the left and upward, which takes us to a room of 2 bridges. Anniversary, however, takes us straight into the bridge room, cutting out just a small bit of that foreshadowing and interconnectedness of the level.
So early on in the game, in the original Tomb Raider, where it's really just, hey look, there's going to be some big baddies that you're going to fight at some point, but you're able to sort of stand above them and shoot them to death. Well, or you could just leave them alone, I suppose. There was nothing really going on in that room in the original TR1, and I was sort of pushing for us to simply, just skip this room on the remake because it wasn't particularly significant, but...
Yeah, I think visually it was one of the more sort of recognizable areas from TR1 though, so we wanted to keep it, but sort of change it a little bit. So it was you that had the idea, right, of breaking the first bridge so that you fall down into the wolf area.
Yeah, so really basically make life difficult for the animal lovers.
Anniversary does tend to favor the player getting into pitched combat with enemies, rather than taking more cowardly approaches, a choice with mixed results. But for now, we acknowledge some other minor differences in things to do. They've added a medpack here in Anniversary, as well as the wolf pit. The following room with the bear pit has slightly different architecture. Anniversary has a large medpack off to the side and requires a rope to get across. The original simply has you drop into the bear pit if you so choose, but you cannot return to the top from here, unlike in Anniversary. Coming after the bear trap, Anniversary gives us a small room to swing across. However, the original had a lot more in store. A wide open room that comes with 2 wolves, a timed door, and its own share of pickups. They considered cutting the bridge room before, but chose not to because of how recognizable it was. It seems that this room was placed on the chopping block instead, which is a shame because the secret room along with the timed door are fairly memorable in my opinion, more so than the single lone pole. It's the first real instance of testing the player's speed in a Tomb Raider game. Both games proceed into long hallways, with Anniversaries serving the presumed purpose of loading, and the original serving the purpose of making the player use more medpacks. But as we move forward, we see a bit of a difference in how we enter into the ending gauntlet of the level.
And this particular area was supposed to be essentially a fortified entrance to their city, whereby you've got arrow areas, these sloped walls, and then holes for people to be able to, I don't know what they do, chuck rocks at people or throw stones or call them names and stuff, leading to the actual main entrance.
Right, it was sort of the last fortitude of the Vilcabambans against the invading Spaniards.
Spanish.
That's right. And originally you came in sort of up top in one of the side areas and sort of worked your way around, but we felt that we really wanted to make the players play the route of the Spanish invaders, since that's essentially what Lara is. She's sort of coming in and going into the home of the natives here. So we wanted to make her run the gauntlet down the center.
Now, this kind of change to a level I do enjoy. A different approach that gives off a different vibe that is still very impactful in its presentation. The timed run that we lost in one of the earlier cut rooms has been sort of made up for with the small timed door section here at the end, though it is very generous in the amount of time it's giving you. Finally, Anniversary gives us the opportunity to get one last secret by climbing to the top of the door to pick up the level's relic, which has a nice description of the item. This particular feature is something I really loved Anniversary for introducing to its secrets. With this, the level ends. I think Caves as a level in Anniversary was really well done in what it added, and while we can lament the parts of the original that were lost in translation, I think it still stands as an example of a decently changed part of the game. Not too much was cut, a notable amount was added, and certain things that were changed were at least changed with a purpose in mind. So now comes everyone's favorite part of reviewing these levels. How does the quality of Anniversary's caves measure up to Tomb Raider 1's caves, and which one reigns superior? The verdict will be many parts objective and subjective. After all, this is my review.
I only have one photo in my hands, and this photo represents the young lady that is still in the running. I will only call one name.
Anniversary. Ah, yes.
Was honestly surprised that an Anniversary level won out for me so early, but overall it just felt like I had a better time playing Mountain Caves. The major negative was that it cut out the first timed door of the series and the cool secret next to it, but the opening tutorial area and the little additional secret elements of the level really made it feel more like an involved experience than the very first Tomb Raider level ever, which isn't really a diss against Tomb Raider 1's caves, it only just barely didn't win out for me.
You found Vilcabamba.
Our more modern game allows for a nice flow from one level into another. The stairs exiting the caves gets you smoothly into an altercation with a bear, and then into another one of those supposed loading corridors. Now, these loading hallways aren't just a straight line of nothing. Usually there's a tiny little diversion of gameplay that Lara needs to traverse in between. It's nothing particularly interesting to look at or figure out, so the impression that these bits can leave you with is that they're either really inoffensive or they're just kind of padding. Nonetheless, it is gameplay that is present in Anniversary that syncs back up with the original very quickly thereafter. Tomb Raider 1 has you step out of the caves and straight into the city of Vilcabamba, whereas Anniversary takes you out of the corridor and onto this little outlook where you can see the village of Vilcabamba in the distance.
At the time, the actual Vilcabamba itself hadn't been discovered when we made TR1. It was literally was a lost city of legend where the Incans disappeared to. By the time we come to Remake, they've actually found Vilcabamba. It doesn't look anything like this for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, when we came to sort of remake this village area, one of the things that was interesting was when Toby was like, we're going to remake the village, and everybody was like, there's a village? Where? And I think it was sort of one of the things in TR1, just because of the way they built it, sort of the fact that there was this village where everyone lived was sort of unclear. So we really wanted to sort of reinterpret the idea of there being a village to sort of clarify that to the user that, oh, look, it's actually a town and a civilization, and there are these little huts. So we sort of kept the individual areas that were in there the same, but we completely relaid it all out and made a big wide open space in the middle where you could sort of see everything all at once and get the real sense that there was a civilization that lived in this area.
So, as you've heard from these two gentlemen, there is a bit of a stark difference in the appearance of both of these versions. The original only has a faint echo of being an Incan village. The stone ceiling is low, so it still gives the sense of being deep in a cave, what with all the sleek stonework sectioning off large pathways. The anniversary iteration captures the village atmosphere a lot better, with a rather scenic waterfall dropping into the center. However, it loses a complex vastness from the village that was present in the original. The corridors of the original in this level have this way of making the player feel immersively lost, despite it not being much more than a circular compound with a couple of offshoots to get into. This circular perimeter is completely absent in Anniversary, and the way forward is a mandatory swim in the center pool, which takes you into one of the huts. In the original, this pool is merely a pathway to secrets and pickups, but ones that take a fair bit of effort for a first-timer. The two versions sync back up in one of the huts, where you need to jump across from one building to another. The original game, however, features two key items in this one spot, which will be relevant later. Lara uses the key and is brought out into this wide open room with another wolf encounter. This area was also a very nice comparison point for the two games, as there is obviously a very stark difference in how the structures have been laid out. The original version, I find, can look very impressive, but also very small when you compare it to what the Anniversary version was cooking. But here is where the two versions really deviate from each other. The original iteration sees Lara through a devious room of swinging blades, followed up by a switch which drops the player into water, which they must swim out of into a rather grand looking room in regards to its aesthetics and architecture. A sight to behold and fairly memorable due to its scope and hazardous introduction. Sadly, Anniversary chose to discard this section entirely, replaced instead with another dreaded corridor of loading, with two little gameplay distractions held within. This in particular feels like a major downgrade, as the overall impressive atmosphere of the original version is lost for something admittedly more realistic-ish, but more dull-looking as a consequence. The atmosphere is dark and cavey as one might expect, with a couple traps littered about, but it doesn't leave that same impression of being sliced open unexpectedly. The path is linear, and the lone wolf encounter doesn't really hold a candle to Mr. Bear here. In the end, Tomb Raider 1's version has you use your extra key item to get through the final bit of Vilcabamba and take you straight into the Lost Valley, while Anniversary's loading hallway ushers you forward in a seamless fashion.
Tomb Raider 1.
Thank you.
The remade version is more sensible in a way, but much like I gave Mountain Caves the win for Anniversary due to it being more involved, I have to do the same in favor of the original's Vilcabamba. Not only does it have more interesting bits to it, but its aesthetics also give it enough points in my book. The big cut at the end massively hurts Anniversary here.
My total attention now.
The original takes you from a small hallway out into a sort of cave with a river flowing through it. You can follow the running water a short walk away to see it empty into a large pool at the bottom of a drop. Anniversary introduces you to this room from the ground level. Well, sort of. It's this straightforward approach that perhaps encouraged the team to be extra emphatic about how the waterfall would be portrayed.
It's one of many places in TR 1, where the obsession with putting things behind waterfalls was played around with. I like this idea of looking behind waterfalls. Oh, wow, that's pretty bizarre, isn't it? So we actually hid the main temple, where you're actually trying to get to is physically behind the waterfall. So
yeah, it was really interesting when we went back and remade this area. We built it really close to the original scale of the room in Tomb Raider 1 the first time, and everybody that played it thought that the waterfall was too small. And it sort of gets at the point that when we're remaking something that people sort of are remembering playing, that their memory of it's different than the actual game. And so we ended up making the waterfall a lot bigger than it was originally to live up to people's expectations of what it should be.
When it comes to scale and proportion, you can definitely see what Jason was referring to. The anniversary version is clearly larger, however, when thinking about it in your own memory without this visual, it can actually be a little hard for it to feel that way. This level specifically is an interesting case study for comparison. Your overall goal in both scenarios is to acquire 3 cogs, which will allow you to activate a large mechanism which shores off the waterfall. The big differences lie in where the key pieces of the puzzle are located. The original places all 3 key items around the lush Lost Valley proper, while Anniversary places only one of the key items in the valley, with the other 2 being inside the cavern, at the base of the waterfall and all the way upstream. The way to activate the waterfall mechanism in the original also lies upstream, whereas in Anniversary it is along the wall on the right side of the room from where you enter. While in the original the way to the valley is fairly straightforward by going through the caves at the base, in Anniversary you'll need at least 1 cog to get to the valley. But luckily the first one is embarrassingly easy to obtain at the start of the level. At any rate, to be as consistent as we can, we'll send both versions of Lara to the valley, with Anniversary Lara needing to do a fair bit more acrobatics to find her way outdoors. Doing these 2 games' journeys back to back, the vibe that stood out to me was that while Tomb Raider 1's path was far more simple to traverse in the grand scheme, the atmosphere of the world was rather impeccable. The level architecture has a way of making you feel like there's a lot you could be checking out on this very light climb to the valley, while Anniversary feels more focused and busy. It holds less of that explorative feeling, as your path is laid out through the tight spaces and limited interactive structures.
The Lost Valley is probably the most memorable part of Tomb Raider 1. And it's really funny because listening to people talk about it, a lot of people remember it being in a cave. And that was because you had really bad draw distance and it just sort of went out to black fog.
Well, pretty much we only had one fog color, which was black. So we couldn't actually, even though we wanted to have sort of an open top, we couldn't really do it. I think actually it's black at the top, so it's as if it was nighttime or something, I suppose, but it was supposed to be an outside area.
And now it really is.
Yeah, but it looks a lot better.
We get to the Lost Valley and we have vastly different approaches to the mayhem. Anniversary takes this opportunity to go all in on the action. Lara will be faced with a gauntlet of 6 red raptors, clearly meant to try and get the player comfortable with the adrenaline dodge mechanic. Meanwhile, in the original, you get introduced to a paltry 2 of them. In between, the player is able to do a bit of roaming about through the new scenery to take it all in. When classic Lara makes the mistake of stepping too far into the wilderness, the player is then able to contemplate the danger that lies before them for all of 3 seconds, before terror strikes them in the face. Meanwhile, as Anniversary Lara catches her breath from the combat, a cutscene brings the magnificent Jurassic beast out from the corner. All the fear the player would have felt in the original is now channeled into Lara herself, and the player is meant to haphazardly see to her survival via the sudden QuickTime events, the popular gameplay cuisine of that time. After an impressive display of survival, the cutscene ends and the battle begins.
That was probably the most memorable bit for a lot of people, I think.
Absolutely.
It was one of the early 3D games, and having that guy hove out the darkness at you, out the draw distance, was pretty frightening. And it was a lot of fun animating because it was pretty much an instant death situation if you were underneath his mouth. He just bit down and shook you about like a little terrier or something, shaking out his little toy. All part of the fun. That kind of was the basis for always making Lara's deaths as horribly cruel and painful looking as possible in the first game.
And now, he's back, and he's a good deal bigger than he was. And that sort of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, which was that people's memory of things is different than what it was. We made the T-Rex originally about half the size he is now, and ended up having to double him in size to sort of ramp up the feel and the intensity and make him scary and everything still. So now he's ginormous.
And then obviously adding in the kind of concept that you use the environment against him instead of just shooting him, because that was always the problem with the TR1 bosses, was that we didn't have time to really do anything special for the fights against the bigger monsters. It's still just essentially just putting as much lead in them as physically possible, and adding in the environmental stuff to this seemed like the most sensible way to big up that combat.
We can clearly determine that we're going for two different vibes here. The original places all fear and agency in the hands of the player. Fight or flee. Many of us may have run away screaming, hid in the tightest corners and taken potshots at the T-Rex from afar. The more courageous of us would have stood our ground and somersaulted our way to victory in a 1v1 all-out brawl. Some of us may have avoided the beast altogether, but the point is that this freedom to feel and freedom to choose is a major standout when comparing the original versus the remake. There's an undoubted charm in the freeform nature of this set piece, because it's not really a set piece at all. In comparison, Anniversary clearly has a specific goal in mind for the player. The fear factor of this encounter in Anniversary is arguably diminished, considering that it is indeed an action set piece and the player is forced to do away with any fear they may have had and face their problems head on. But the credit I give to the T-Rex in the remake, at the very least, is that there is a method to defeating it effectively, which requires some minor thought beyond just filling the beast with lead. Though it might still be too minor for me to consider this an altogether better iteration in how it is executed. This isn't me merely preferring the scary freeform approach of the original over the more dramatic action-focused approach. I do love a well-done, over-the-top, badass action sequence in a game that not only makes the player feel strong, but also smart or skilled. I just don't think that the T-Rex boss in Anniversary does thrilling skill-based action boss better than the original does its frantic jump scare monster that you need to survive in any way you can. The Lost Valley Classic has a lot of neat little nooks and crannies that lead into small little spaces and paths, which sometimes take the player from one section of the environment to another, giving you that, ooh, what do we have here feeling. Anniversary's nooks and crannies tend not to go anywhere and stop at just giving you a pickup for your trouble. The only real extended path happens to be the way back, essentially making the Lost Valley a simple point A to point B mission. After this point, we head back to the waterfall cave and make the ascent up and across the stream. In Anniversary, we do this to get the last cog, but in the original, we use it to activate the final mechanism.
Strangely enough, this is actually one of the areas that I remember the most from Tomb Raider 1, was jumping back and forth across this river.
Because we didn't have nice save systems. Pretty much, if you died, you're going to be playing at least almost half a level, right, to get back to where you were. So jumping across the waterfall was just a way to sort of be kinder with the reset. So I suppose it's different now, because it's actually kind of crueler now to do that, because with save points being so liberally scattered around, like having to actually ride all the way down the waterfall back into the original area is more of a punishment than just dropping people onto spikes.
That's right, because we made the traversal up the waterfall so much more intricate now. It is a little bit crueler. Yeah, it adds to the tension.
It does.
By the time we're done at the top of the stream, in the original, we're able to proceed straight to the exit behind the waterfall. Meanwhile, Anniversary Lara needs to take one more climbing session up to the final cog receptacle, which finally activates the mechanism with a more impressive display. One hop, skip, and a swim away, and we move on to the next level. This was a hard one. The original does what it intends to do in the T-Rex Valley better than Anniversary does, at the very least in a more satisfying way. Anniversary's Valley is still fantastic, and I do genuinely feel like I prefer it at some points. Good scale, interesting platforming, good music, well-hidden secrets, and better combat where combat is necessary. But the original keeps that feel of exploration better throughout. I'll be honest, it's kind of a tie in my book. I will actually concede the winner for The Lost Valley up to you guys in the comments. Until then, I can't properly decide.
No.
Anniversary is gonna need a moment to load in, so let's move to the original. A square room with 3 paths. The path straight ahead leads to the ultimate prize, blocked by a large gate. To the left and right, closed gates. The striking thing about this room isn't its structure but its presentation. Bright warm color and ornate artistry decorate the interior. Anniversary Lara has gotten to this point by now, and we see that they've taken the opportunity to again increase the scale, and also to give it the ancient breakdown treatment. The colors here are faded in line with some realism, but we can clearly see the artwork and engineering of the culture on display. Taking both Laras on the same forward path, they're met with the classic boulder trap, forcing both of them backward with different levels of dramaticness and destruction. For original Lara, it was pretty much just a good opportunity for death, but for Anniversary Lara, it not only barred off the path to the Scion, but it did a hefty bit of demolition to the platform in the center of the room. So, in order to be at least a little consistent in our approach to analyzing these two games, we'll just go ahead and have Anniversary Lara do a bit of extra platforming to the top of the room in order to do a bit more demolitions so that she too can enter the rightmost room along with her original counterpart. The original game takes us to an entirely different crossroads from the main one that we had before. 3 paths, 3 choices. To be consistent with Anniversary, we will just head through the middle path straight ahead, which puts us to this lever placed above a suspiciously fragile bit of flooring.
In the original, earlier on in the level, we had put in a switch over a trapdoor, and you pull the switch and the trapdoor literally drops you away into some water, so you sort of like go, oh, that's so cruel, but then you're in water and it's totally fine, so just sort of to freak you out. What we did this time with this particular room, once you get to the final temple, you pull the switch, because everybody always runs over and pulls switches, and it drops you straight into combat.
Into the wolf den, one of the rooms that I liked very much and wanted to keep. We talked for a while about possibly not including this area, so we were sort of trying to decide what areas to pick from Tomb Raider 1, but it was one of my favorite areas because of the cruelty of it all.
Cruelty, yeah.
For a developer, cruelty toward the player is one of the most fun and rewarding parts of the job. The room below in both games are quite similar in function, in that they both ultimately lead to a switch which opens one of the gateways that will allow Lara to get to her goal. It's at this point where the original and Anniversary really deviate, but in ways that still reference each other. The ways left and right in the original leads to this extra room that Anniversary does not seem to feature. The room itself is wide open, with a few spikes and 2 pillars which move around based on a few switches that control them. The player's job is to coordinate the movement of the pillars so that Lara has access to them for platforming to other outcroppings in the room. In my first run through of Anniversary, I had it in my head that this room was altogether scrapped for the remake. However, on further inspection, I now see that what they're actually doing is taking the overall idea of this room and placing it into the main center entrance area of Anniversary. Hence, it's not that Anniversary has added or subtracted gameplay in this level per se, but rather the game has transferred it in a way that actually feels so natural and subtle that it's kind of easy to go unnoticed. However, as is the usual case in Anniversary, because tasks are so streamlined and in some ways obvious, it doesn't capture as much of the perceived puzzling nature of the original's implementation. The sort of black box presentation of this room, where you're not sure how things will move or where these hidden pathways will lead you, really makes it feel like a larger mystery to figure out, compared to Anniversary, where the puzzle pieces and their purpose are all in plain view and unobscured by hidden passages. The original level also feels larger by comparison. Amazing how different implementations of hallways can make such a different impression. Let's move back into the main center room and proceed into the remaining open path. Both Laras have access to it now, but Anniversary Lara's got a few extra traps to deal with. They both make it through the gauntlet to receive different prizes. For Anniversary Lara, it's the final switch that she needs to finally get access to the Scion piece from the main room. but for original Lara, she's already gotten to her prize. But to be fair, she has gone through her fair share of extra effort already. Anniversary Lara makes a dangerous escape from this pathway, which increases its amount of danger on her way back, including not just the darts, but the wonderful swinging blades which were previously missing from the Vilcabamba level. Finally, both of our Laras are back in sync, despite taking alternative routes from each other. The player is free to inspect the Scion chamber in the original by themselves, the only real point of interest being the corpse of Qualopec left in his chair, and the unsettlingly nosy mummy that won't mind its own business. Meanwhile, Anniversary Lara takes up her own agency to give us a bit of a translation of the writing on the wall. In the original, Lara shoots first. In Anniversary, the mummy shoots first. Regardless of this little distraction, both Laras take their prize and must now get the hell out. Anniversary though has the gall to tease the player with the sight of Qualopec getting up from his chair, hinting at a potential boss fight or maybe a chase. Alas, it can't deliver such an event. The mad dash out of the ruins is fairly tame, with Anniversary going out of its way to portray a crumbling ceiling which doesn't hurt you at all, while the original doesn't have any sense of urgency beyond the music and one instance of a ceiling collapse, which actually can kill you. Back in the Cavern of the Lost Valley, Larson is awaiting Lara. He's either going to be shooting first and asking questions later, or waiting at the edge of the pool ready to flirt again. The gameplay is very different in both. Anniversary's back at it again with QuickTime events, while the original is a relentless shootout. After effectively bringing Larson to his knees, or on his back, he gets the old shakedown from Lara, after which he mistakes her mercy for weakness and gets a boot to the face for his insolence. We will acknowledge here that original Larson is the typical less than remarkable stooge, and seemingly a new acquaintance of Lara's, despite that point creating a bit of a plot hole in a later game. Anniversary Larson is therefore on more familiar terms with Lara, is notably less dull, and clearly has a thing for her because why wouldn't he? Original Larson unwittingly informs Lara that there's more than one piece of the Scion, whereas Anniversary Lara already found that out from Qualopec's tomb. So it's off to do some more reconnaissance. In order to infiltrate Natla's headquarters for more information, Classic Lara is blowtorching the elevator cables to break them. A fairly dangerous prospect, but at the very least it's more subtle than Anniversary Lara's approach of shooting the connection in the elevator shaft.
When we were looking at the sequence, it seemed like it was going to be pretty boring in the original game. Her just breaking into an office and going up, rifling through Natla's drawers. So we came up with this idea of her using the counterweight to fly out the lift shaft. And it's kind of interesting because I remember that basically that actually got sort of plagiarized. No, not plagiarized. What's the word? It was homaged in the Matrix movie, which was pretty cool actually. In remaking the office section, we decided to use that space to actually build a little bit more information on Natla, because we don't really get to see a lot of Natla, so we came up with this idea of, instead of Lara originally just read some kind of diary, she gets to look through Natla's
Video logs,
exactly, and we get a little bit of backstory both on Larson and Pierre, and it was an interesting way to sort of get more character going on without Lara having to sort of interact with them or change the sequences too much.
God's sake, woman, this is a stealth mission. OG Lara reads through Natla's files to find accounts from a monk who outlines the location of the next piece of the Scion. Personally, I would have liked this method of relaying that information more if there were more instances of accounts from this monk, or at least accounts from other historical figures talking about these legendary pieces of the Scion. The monk in Tomb Raider 1 feels too isolated in his inclusion, and I guess that's why I actually quite enjoyed the decision to scrap the monk's account in favor of giving more screen time to Larson, Pierre, and Natla. Plus, I've always absolutely loved this small interaction of Lara stopping the video feed before Pierre can finish identifying the Scion's location. It's a great little indication of how on top of things Lara is, and portrays the rivalry between her and Pierre in advance.
Tomb Raider 1.
Aesthetics do a lot of heavy lifting for this ranking. Though perhaps not super realistic, the visuals of the original and the remaster just stand out so much more, on top of already being more complex and having a more loaded level design. Plus, the Larson fight at the end gives it a nice bump in the rating.
St. Francis Folly.
A level starts with Lara having her guns preemptively drawn. She's immediately accosted by a couple of lions, which is kind of rude of the developers in my opinion. After dispatching the cats, original Lara is allowed to survey the interior of the Folly's entrance. Anniversary Lara, however, is interrupted by a familiar voice.
I am a professional, mademoiselle. I focus on the job, and I get paid.
We wanted to, first of all, make a character that was a little bit more interesting than just to shoot first and ask questions later. But we also wanted to sort of keep one of the aspects of Pierre that made him really interesting in the first game, I really liked about him anyway, which is that you'd shoot him loads and loads of times, and then he'd just suddenly decide, that's it, I'm running away. And he'd just, as soon as he went out of line of sight, he'd just vaporize, basically.
Which was a little cheap.
Yeah, so when we came to doing the remake, I was going, that's great! I love the way that he just like goes behind a pillar and vanishes, and everyone's going, no, it's rubbish, it's ridiculous, where does he go? So we actually decided to play on that in the cutscene and have him sort of be sort of this ninja guy who could be anywhere behind any pillar, potentially, and basically work that into the cutscene.
First on the docket for OG Lara, using this block to activate a couple of pressure plates on the floor. This gives her access to a switch, which will open up her end goal for this section, the door above the entrance. Remake Lara has her own pressure plate to activate, so her sequence begins with a climb to the top of the pillars, taking her to a room above the entrance to the Folly, with a somewhat unique bit of puzzling in this mural on the wall. This small puzzle gives her access to a giant sphere which weighs down the pressure plate in order to proceed out this section of the level. Original Lara, however, has the sad misfortune of being dropped into croc-infested waters. This is just another little piece cut from Anniversary, but it is moments like these that really give these levels character in the original. This was probably many people's first time being traumatized by a pool of water in a Tomb Raider game. With a little bit of draining the waterway, Lara can quickly dispatch her reptilian friend, and both girls finally get to the real meat of the level.
I think a lot of people really remember that sort of big vertical room and the climbing up the broken thing in the middle. I mean, we really wanted to sort of keep that feel when we redid it, and then just sort of make it more involved. But essentially it's pretty much unchanged. We even sort of went back and duplicated the textures from the original for like the floor panels in the middle, because they're sort of so recognizable.
It was an interesting sort of goal with that area when we were, because it's quite common that game designers, even when they have a 3D vertical sort of space that they can play with, they tend to sort of end up just making long flat things anyway. So that particular area from the original game was just sort of, let's go as vertical as we possibly can and see what we can do with it. And it was great with Lara being so sort of easy to kill, because it was such a frightening space to move through. And you know, as usual with Anniversary, everything is double the size now, so it's even more frightening looking.
This room is thematically consistent in both iterations of this adventure. A big, vertical space with the same goal of opening 4 doors. Anniversary demands more intricate tasks from Lara to make up for how streamlined her platforming is, while in the original, merely ascending and descending are intricate tasks in of themselves. Platforming here shows off the big difference in the two systems of platforming. Not only must the player be more methodical in the original, but the way Lara interacts with her environment makes every edge and surface have potential platforming value. Whereas in Anniversary, certain surfaces are just obviously dead in terms of gameplay potential. And this dead interactivity does a lot to contribute in how straightforward and or obvious certain pathways are. The game still requires a certain mastery over its platforming, but it isn't as rewarding per se.
In the original, the idea of the 2 sections of the room was, the first one was obviously just, it was kind of really just basically a random death machine. You had this checkered pattern on the floor, and you know, you're supposed to sort of be able to, I think, tell where the next lightning bolt was supposed to come and then try and avoid that area. But in reality, you just had to run across as fast as you possibly could in case you get fried.
This is quality design. Random death.
Random death machine. Do you realise how much time we had? Anyway, so after the random death machine, the concept of the next room actually was I like the idea of having to put yourself like into the most dangerous position you possibly get, right?
Right.
Where
Under the hammer.
You have to physically stand under the hammer and then wait for it kind of like to crank back and then drop, and you have to just run off at the last second. And that was particularly evil in the first one because Lara moved so slowly. She took so long to react to anything. So you kind of... It really made for the situation where you'd sort of stand on the pressure plate and then you kind of run off and go, oh, and it didn't trigger, and you go, oh, it's a little bit too much of a chicken that time, and you'd run back and go, woo, run off. Well, at least that's what I used to do anyway.
The Thor room in the original is definitely more atmospheric due to the size and ominous dread of the hammer, but when it comes to gameplay involvement and mechanics, I think Hephaestus takes this one for me, especially since the lightning section is less random in its implementation and has a clear goal in order for you to proceed. The lightning only hits the most elevated surfaces, so the player at least has some logical way to avoid unnecessary damage.
This wasn't even a room in the first game, it was a hallway with a ball at the top.
We didn't even have time to actually build Atlas. The whole idea was that there'd be this statue with, obviously the chap with the big rolling ball, which was one of the small number of actual generic tools we could use to make our puzzles, and have it sitting on his back and textured like the world. We just didn't have time to do any of that, so we just had the ball at the top of a ramp. That left the rest of it to people's imaginations.
That's right. So now we've actually been able to build Atlas.
Woo!
Yeah, so that's good. We just sort of added the added difficulty of having a pit at the end. In the original, you just sort of hid behind a ledge and let the ball roll over you, didn't you?
No, that was the same. It was basically you had to drop down into the pit.
Yeah.
Let the ball roll over the top of you because it would fly over the top.
Yeah. So
you made it a bit more complicated.
So Atlas in Anniversary also takes the win for me, in both gameplay and atmosphere. I don't think I really need to say more on this.
Alright, Neptune.
Yeah, so originally the Neptune room was essentially just a hole in the floor with a little pool of water, wasn't it?
How dare you! No, like the goal with the Neptune area was to actually give people a sense of real claustrophobia underwater. So it was an extremely long shaft, and you get the moment you stepped into it, it sucked you all the way down to the bottom. And I wanted to get this feeling of like that terror of being, deep underwater and knowing that you can hardly swim back. So because the draw distance on the original Tomb Raider, basically it faded to black after not very far. The cool thing about the Neptune room was that you get sucked down this hole so far that it's black above you. You can't even see the surface anymore. And it was that horror of being pulled down to your doom that I was trying to get with the Neptune room. But what did you guys do? Looks pretty crazy.
Yeah, so we took that original area where you get sucked down, and then we built an entire new room off the side of that. So instead of just pulling the switch and swimming back up, now you pull the switch and you go into an entirely new room themed around Neptune and water. Though, you know what I just realized? We renamed this room.
What did you rename it to?
It's Poseidon.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, see, goes back to originally Toby not knowing who the Greek and the Roman gods were.
Oh, it's not as bad a mistake as Thor, though, is it?
It's true. But the room's still sort of all water-centric. Get the thing and then swim back up the hole.
Your doom.
Well, you still got to swim back up.
It's nice that the rooms now have been appropriately named according to Greek mythology, but it is somewhat ironic since the Legend Anniversary Underworld trilogy has lore that would actually facilitate the out-of-place presence of geographically/culturally incorrect mythological names.
Thor, the Norse god of thunder. Whatever are you doing down here in St. Francis Folly?
Again, Anniversary pulls out a win. The lack of doom is indeed a sore point for the atmosphere, but the added puzzle element of Anniversary is one of the few instances where the remake adds more than the original had. Although, in retrospect, I think the Poseidon room is just the consolation prize we get for them cutting out the water draining section with the crocodile earlier. But we still don't have a crocodile though, so I suppose it's not quite the same now. Even though I prefer the anniversary interpretation, I must say that Jason was quite audacious in his jab at the original's Pool of Doom. Anniversaries is cool, but there's no need to throw that much shade at the original.
The Damocles room was basically, I mean, obviously his story is about having a sword sitting over his head. The plan with the room was basically that you walk in and you see this like forest of swords hanging from the ceiling, and you think that's bad news. You know, there's a prize at the end of the room and you just know what's going to happen when you take it. So it's kind of really building that expectation of when the swords come flying towards you like magic missiles.
That's right. We just sort of took that concept and ramped it up, and now we've got swords in the walls and swords in the floor. It's sword-tastic.
It dilutes a little bit the whole sword from the ceiling, though, which is the legend.
True.
Now, while I would also give Anniversary the win for this room, I do understand the qualms of the player base in how frustrating the mechanics of Anniversary can be in this very room. In particular, to do with the camera. Whether it's how the camera makes you mess up your movement inputs, or how janky it can make a perpendicular wall jump off of a wall run. The remaster has the better visual atmosphere, whereas the Anniversary version does the rare and surprisingly good job of using music and a few little sound effects to build up some tension. Now, with all the rooms conquered, we are well on our way to the next level. And oh boy, this one is gonna be one for the books.
Anniversary.
Lovely.
Excellent work from Crystal on Anniversary's St. Francis. It has lots of extra content to cover for what was missing, a good new vision for certain rooms, and the individual puzzles are arguably superior to anything in the original level. Let's get it.
You litterbug.
As we go through the door, Anniversary Lara stumbles through yet another long, dark hallway, while our classic explorer is placed into a room with a pool. Beyond the pool, she's greeted with a lovely bit of architecture, which Anniversary seems to have attempted to meagerly reference, but you'd be forgiven for not noticing such a pale imitation. In the original, you're able to enter this building from the front, but to no real progress. Instead, Lara must go around to the left and climb up onto the higher floor of the structure, which Anniversary Lara must also do, but to a much smaller extent. For Classic Lara, the purpose of this detour is finding an alternative way into the building, from which she will be able to enter the Colosseum proper. Anniversary Lara takes the alternative route of taking a swim through a flooded tunnel to reach the Colosseum from an entirely new angle. We arrive in what I would call a Colosseum storage room, which houses cages which the animals or gladiators or combatants would be kept in. As such, while original Lara has her grand reveal of the arena from the top, Anniversary Lara comes from the bottom and is placed right inside the ring.
The Colosseum this time is round.
Yeah, I see that's a really major improvement. Didn't have any angles apart from the right angles, obviously first time round. So, and it's particularly impressive when you think that again, Colosseum isn't Greek, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not Greek, but we just sort of fudged it.
Yeah,
It's Toby's fault because he put it in the first game.
yeah.
We had to put it in this one.
You know, it is interesting that despite making the Colosseum an actual circle, they haven't seemed to commit to the whole aspect of making everything bigger to compensate for how we remember the area in Tomb Raider 1. Circular spaces will always feel more cramped than rectangular ones, so there really was a bit of a missed opportunity here to make the space larger. Perhaps there were technical limitations, but there is absolutely no denying the grandness that the original's Colosseum hits you with right out of the gate.
In the first one, it was all you had to do essentially was, I think you had to pick up a couple of keys down in
And then
the,
go around the top, right?
and then yeah, there was like a specific route around the outside, and obviously Pierre showed up again in the first one. But yeah, it was a very simple area. Basically, just unlock a couple of keys and then go up to the king's viewing or the emperor's viewing area, Caesar, I suppose, which was full of monkeys, and then get out of there into the next area.
They're still monkeys. They're gorillas. They throw stuff now. We sort of kept the idea the same. We just wanted to sort of, obviously Laura's more nimble now, so we had to sort of increase the sort of level of detail in her interactions with the environment. So we just sort of made the environments more complex. We've got her traversing over various ruins and bits of broken column and pieces of the ceiling that have fallen out. So essentially it's the same. It's just sort of updated to match sort of the abilities of Lara.
No, I may have to slightly disagree with Toby here, because I don't find the Colosseum in the original to be that simple or straightforward at all. At least not in comparison to how the other levels have been. Yes, the route can be straightforward when you know where you're going, but the little distractions like these timed doors or dealing with Pierre, pushing these blocks around and figuring out a few jumps are still conventional time-consuming tomb raiding activities. And perhaps it's this perceived simplicity to the original's iteration that has resulted in Anniversary's version feeling a bit less involved as a whole. Jason is correct in that the environments are more complex and Lara's interactions are more granular, but when it comes to a high-level observation of where she needs to go from points A to B to C, it still ends up feeling less involved than the original. Not at all helped by how small it all feels. The gorillas meet Anniversary Lara for some combat, in their first debut in this game. Also, Pierre just kind of says hi, I guess.
Let our pick up the pace.
Tomb Raider 1.
Okay.
Needless to say, the original took the cake for this level. The Colosseum just has a real stark difference that can't go unnoticed. I think Anniversary was also once again trying to put some emphasis on its combat encounters in this level, but since the strategy for the enemies remains pretty much the same ever since the first level, there's no real challenge or intrigue for a veteran of the game, save for trying to make it as hectic and insane as possible by showing mercy to the poor zoo animals. I will say that I did have more fun doing this grand combat encounter in Anniversary than I did in the OG. Still, the original Colosseum is miles more enjoyable, especially with Pierre popping in to annoy us a couple of times.
And I will buy you a milkshake.
Okay, so this is a bit of a big one. Midas Palace in both iterations start you off in a room with a pool, with some lovely dolphins painted on the walls. What you'll find though is that Anniversary seems to have a bit more going on in this room, with a more enclosed look to it. Both games feature a path to the left, right, and straight ahead, but in Anniversary these doors are closed. There is a lot of consolidation, streamlining, and cutting in the Anniversary version for this level. From the pool room, if we proceed straight ahead, we enter a room that's seen better days, which leads to another large ornate building in a cave, whose only purpose is to house a lever to open a gate in one of the side paths to the left and right. This whole center path detour doesn't really hold much, but it is pretty much absent from Anniversary, and said absence is the first in multiple cuts that really diminish the grand navigation of this level in the remake. Returning to the center pool room again, if we head to the left, we come to the gate that was just opened, and through it, a nice little garden area. Now, the aesthetic of this area very much seems to have been placed into the main pool room of Anniversary, reflected by the foliage, the pillars, the little basins that were meant to hold water, etc. We can see an attempt to combine elements of the much larger original Midas Palace into the main pool room of Anniversary, and we don't have to proceed much further before we see the next element that's been consolidated, the Midas statue.
We did the thing you guys intended, which was to build the Midas statue.
Yeah, I mean, the garden itself was supposed to have, well, exactly, I mean, we had, we just didn't have the resources to build a gigantic statue in the garden.
Right.
So it's pretty much, there was a garden, and if you climbed about on the roof, you could find a little room that had a hand in it, basically. And
it had a hand and a foot?
Yeah, and that's about as much as we could really do.
And the best part is that the foot and like up to the knee, I think it was, and then that was the ceiling of the room.
Yes. Well, it's, roof had collapsed or something, probably.
While more caved in and obscured than its Anniversary counterpart, this room in the original only serves as a place to hold Midas's hand, a tool which the player will need to end the level. You can imagine that all the traversal we did to even get to the statue will do a lot to make the level feel much larger than Anniversary. Anniversary, which places the statue right back at the start of the level. We proceed to the right path from the pool room, and we have a bit of a branch, The right leads you to another section of the palace, which seems to be another big piece cut out from Anniversary. We go back and take the stairs, which lands us in the second hub-like area of this level. These switches need to be activated in the correct combination in order to open specific doors around this large room, and it is through these doors that we will be able to access our lead bars. This room has also effectively been assimilated by the pool room in Anniversary. As in Anniversary, there are 3 switches on the second level of the room which will open 3 different doors from which Lara can acquire her lead bars. But unlike the original, a specific combination is not required. Lara need only reach the switches and she will have access. Yet another point off of Anniversary for the puzzle element. What's more is that in the original, there are actually 4 different doors. The extra door actually leads to the end of the level, which is where Lara will need to insert her 3 gold bars, whereas Anniversary makes things much simpler and has you place your gold bars right on Midas' statue itself. No extra footwork or puzzle work required. So at this point, let's get started on the bars, which means that finally, Anniversary Lara can get started on her level. We'll start both of these girls in the most consistent room, the spike room.
This was pretty much originally just, let's make Lara do loads and loads of jumps where you fall straight onto spikes because it's so painful looking when she goes on spikes.
It all gets back to Toby's love to see Lara die.
What? Look at the man, you put spikes on everything, haven't you?
Yeah. We took the idea of the spikes and we made it even more spiky. Spikes are fun. Watching Lara get spiked is fun, though we can't actually do that anymore. The ESRB doesn't allow us to impale Lara in a teen-rated game anymore. So, you didn't have ratings when you made TR1, did they?
Yeah, we must have done.
I don't know, you impaled her all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
For classic Lara, this should be no problem for the player, whereas in Anniversary, you may find yourself tripped up occasionally by the timed platforms and Lara's inconsistency with jumping. Regardless, the girls snag their bars and that's one key item down. Now unfortunately, the next bar we go after is set in stone in Anniversary, since we can't access the fire room without going through the collapsing pillar room first. The idea of these rooms is the same.
The only thing that we really could do in the original TR1 engine was essentially swap rooms. We could build 2 rooms that were identically sized and we could swap them so long as Lara wasn't in it. We actually managed to get quite a bit from that, and the sand puzzle was basically this kind of concept of, you know, if you was to pull out the support of a floor, then the whole room would crumble and fall apart above, type of thing, and you'd get a completely different layout. So you could essentially move across the room in 2 different ways.
Right. The whole real sort of nature of Lara pulling out a foundation of a column be damned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A block there you pulled out and then the world sort of rumbled, and when you went upstairs it was all different. But of course, fabulous new technology.
That's right. Now you go down in the room and it rumbles and some sand falls through. And then you go back up and the room's changed.
That's good, yeah.
We've come a long way in over a decade.
It's actually one of the things I wanted to do was be able to show the actual changes that, you know, basically just sort of fake an animation of the change in environment. This particular one, even you guys couldn't chew off, could you? Whole room collapsing and turning into...
Yeah, that was we tried to pitch that and the producers came back and said, no, you don't get to build 2 versions of this room. So we did one and we did what we could. It still sells it, I think. At least as well as the original Tomb Raider did.
Anniversary Lara gets her lead bar early. Both of our Laras take an alternative path in the newly destroyed room to get higher up and take a detour. Anniversaries being a bit more hazardous and intricate as per usual. What's nice here is that Lara's journey takes her to a nice little overhead stream area in both of the games. In the original, this stream is located in the really big room that we came to before, except higher up. However, in Anniversary, the way brings us back to the main pool room. So that's yet another element that's been consolidated from an entirely unique piece of the original level. For Anniversary Lara, she's pretty much done with the second room, as she's now able to pull her last switch to open the fire room. She's already in the main room, so she can head there right away. Original Lara has a bit more running to do though. As we recall, she doesn't even have her second lead bar yet. So we have her hop down one level, make her way around the room to a small crevice on the far side, through a long cave-like passage only to end back up in the pool room just like Anniversary Lara, except this time from above. She still doesn't have access to her lead bar yet though, so we continue all the way across the pool room into yet another caved path, then through another small hidden area with a waterway. All of this to have us end up on the top of the roof of the ornate structure we came to when we first started this whole level. This lead bar has made me reflect a bit. Bigger, more involved level architecture has usually been the more desirable tomb raiding experience, but for this particular instance, I find myself feeling that it may have gone on a bit too long. While I do enjoy the overall idea of having the player comb through different parts of the level from a different height and perspective, there was just so much navigation in order to do so that I think for just this once, a bit more streamlining would have been nice. What really sent that message home for me is going through the path and realizing just how much of the travel time was cave corridors, the very thing that Anniversary's been utilizing too much of. Now we finally get to deal with the fire room. Back in the day for first timers, with how Lara used to control, this could be a time-consuming nightmare. Recording this room for this playthrough was so beyond simple, especially with modern controls, and in the grand scheme of things, I've always found the fire room to be easier in Tomb Raider 1 than it was in Anniversary.
Originally was sort of a series of columns with fire in the middle that you had to sort of time jumping across to get to the piece at the end, and there was water on the sides. So our first little pillar here is the homage to the original Tomb Raider pillars. And then the rest of the room we completely changed. So now there's still lots of fire, but we've, added more timing elements to it to make it harder.
Well, originally, the whole point of the room actually was that there was actually it was all about the fact that Lara worked like clockwork. So we'd been training people to sort of jump from the very edge, but what we did was we stuck this sort of start line a bit earlier, so that if you actually literally jumped or started running from there and then jumped, then you could make the entire series of jumps in one go, right? And that was the only real way to essentially get through it without being burned. Actually, well, I think this ended up being possibly one of the biggest sort of hardest parts in the whole game. From what I understand, I think most people defaulted to literally just running through the fire and taking health packs until they could pick up the thing at the far end and jump in the water to save themselves, which, well, didn't end up being exactly what I was hoping for.
And probably not as fun as you had originally intended.
No.
Oh, you mean to say that using med packs isn't the way you're supposed to solve this challenge? How about that? The real piece of crap in Anniversary's fire room is the secret relic hidden within. A timed sequence where the player must pull a switch and traverse the fire pillars with all the haste of the original game, and yet with twice the amount of opportunities for error. It was always the worst relic in the game to get, but other than that, the fire room does look quite nice. Bigger, more involved, and we also get introduced to Lara's first crocodile in Anniversary. Meanwhile, original Tomb Raider 1 takes this opportunity to introduce the player to the rats. Cute little things that in the original were actually able to swim. Sadly, they can't do that in Anniversary. We are finally finished with all the lead collection. Anniversary Lara heads back to the main pool room, while original Lara takes the extra trek back to the Midas statue past the garden. The girls convert their lead bars and go to place them in their respective receptacles, but not before turning themselves into gold first. Anniversary Lara is already at the end of her level, which in juxtaposition to the original is located at the very start of the level.
Tomb Raider 1.
Classic Midas Palace takes the cake. It's bigger, it's better, and it scratches that classic puzzle platformer itch at the back of your brain. Anniversary has some nice little challenging additions in the trap rooms that kind of help it stand out a bit, but the overall experience isn't hitting that great. You'll more than likely find yourself get a little peeved at the small annoyances like the predictable guerrilla attacks in the hallways and Lara's occasional faulty jumps. and the frustration of attaining the relics. Original Tomb Raider is the one.
I know where to find you, don't I, Pierre?
So both levels start pretty much the same way. Push this block, face this rat, pull this elevated switch, and in we go.
I mean, the goal with this was to sort of just create massive water-based uber puzzle, basically. A frightening level when you walk into it to actually try and work out where you can go, where you should go. And that was like one of the real challenges with trying to balance this room in the first game, was when you give the player as many options as it looks like they have, it's extremely difficult to tell where they should try and actually start going and exploring.
The overall architectures of these cisterns feel very similar, but of course very different at the same time. Certain nooks, balconies, and outcroppings remain recognizable, but traversal as usual has been redone to adapt to Lara and the different gameplay angles this room takes in Anniversary. Somehow, the scale of these two iterations managed to feel almost identical despite Lara's traversal speed being inconsistent between the two, where Anniversary Lara takes a fair bit to jog across the room, meanwhile Classic Lara does these gargantuan leaps across distances that make the room seem smaller yet bigger at the same time. It's still a bit hard to describe.
All of our goal basically with the side rooms in the original game was just to sort of actually just to make life much more hellish for the player. I think that seemed to be our goal anyway, whereby you had to change the water level of the entire area more than once. So you had to do things in a prescribed order that you had no idea what that order was until you found out the hard way.
You were so cruel back then.
Yeah. This was a pretty evil part of the level, I have to say.
When we remade this room, we decided we wanted to cut off all of the side rooms and just make them like these little nooks in the wall, so that you could you never had to leave the space of the main area, and you could sort of be there when the water levels changed and whatnot. I think it turns out a little bit better.
I won't assert that simply because the side rooms have been cut off, that the level itself loses an overall impact in terms of tomb raiding gameplay inherently. When playing a puzzle platformer, a player might yearn for a certain mental stimulation through navigation and working out solutions that a wide open singular area could indeed accomplish just as well as a complex of different side rooms could, but it is an uphill battle. As noticed in previous levels, taking out extra pockets and rooms can really flatten how much a level really makes the player think. They might have asked questions like, where did I see a keyhole for this key? How do I get to that lever in that other room? Has this other room changed now since the water level is different? Certain questions can pop up in a level full of hidden and sectioned off areas which a wide open and visible architectural space won't exactly replicate. So Anniversary is gonna have to work really hard to make the puzzle element of a consolidated cistern make just as much of an impact as the original cistern. I don't oppose the idea of making Anniversary's room more centered around this one area. In fact, I quite like that Anniversary can offer a different take on the level in that regard. I can say, based off of memory, that my time in Anniversary Cistern was fairly extended when I first played it. But now that I've become relatively adept at finishing both levels in both games, the original naturally still makes me second guess my pathing sometimes, whereas my speedrunning pursuit in Anniversary usually goes off without a hitch. Much like most of Tomb Raider 1's levels, there's more enemies which are technically easier to dispatch than Anniversary's, and yet Anniversary's enemies don't quite feel as engaging, due to having mastered the headshot mechanic and the enemies not really ambushing you when you least expect them to as much. The Classic Cistern is yet again a big old key quest, which, while effective and engaging as a puzzle, does begin to show its repetitiveness after the previous 3 consecutive levels relied so heavily on the key collecting principle. So I actually applaud Anniversary for taking a break on that front and leaning into other mechanics in terms of pressure plates and navigating this little raft across the room, which she will need to get up onto the exit from this area at the rightmost side of the entrance. It's a nice little room with a pool at the center. But before we take a dip, it's at this point that we will need to take a break from Anniversary Lara because, Well, we'll get into that in a bit. For now, OG Lara has completed her little key collection escapade and needs to head to the exit straight ahead from the entrance instead. She goes through a couple of intermediate rooms until she gets into this wide open space that looks like a giant chessboard with some collapsing floors and a lone pushable block, which is hiding the level exit and is useful for acquiring a secret in case you needed this level to be any longer. The player is free to dive into the hole and thus ends the cistern. Now you may be wondering when we'll be getting back to Anniversary Lara, as surely now that OG Lara has finished her cistern, it only makes sense to return to Anniversary Lara to finish up her cistern section as well. Well,
No, that's not right.
Anniversary has taken the cistern level from the original and merged it with the Tomb of Tihocan, resulting in one less level on the list. This doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a whole lot of missing content in Anniversary. After all, a modern game can still make a singular level take just as long as 2 levels from an older game, right?
No.
There have been so many rooms and enemies and traps and risky swimming sections and precarious heights that have just gone missing in Anniversary. Even though I definitely would have wanted more of the original Tomb of Tihocan to be represented in Anniversary, I can actually comfortably say that not all of the gameplay in the original level was entirely significant enough for me to want it replicated. A few parts did in fact seem like fat that needed to be trimmed in the original. A room like this one with the slicing blade, for example, felt a bit too similar to some of the rooms in the cistern for me to feel like it was an engaging use of my time. They also continued the consecutive key finding trope, which really doesn't feel inspired when keyholes are a mere one room away from their keys. The only pieces of content from the classic Tomb of Tihocan that I really see being impactful and recognizable additions to Anniversary are this bit where you raise these stones to platform across the water, and this room with the 4 tiles and 4 doors. I can totally see why they would think it's a good idea to cut out most of Tihocan's tomb from the original, but I just feel like they missed out on too much representation of people's memory of that level. So my verdict: original Tomb of Tihocan was doing too much, Anniversary Tomb of Tihocan wasn't doing enough. Original Lara has 2 switches to find in her cavernous complex, whereas Anniversary Lara only needs to find 1 switch in the underwater nook to open the door.
And then, of course, you and your having to do everything twice as extreme changed it from 1 centaur crashing out of a statue into 2.
That's right. We had to ramp it up for the kids.
So for the record, the original does in fact have 2 centaurs crashing out of their statues. They just activate at different times, and the player is not likely to see the second one before ending the level.
We not only made it 2 centaurs, but we made the centaurs twice as big too.
Yes, of course.
So it's 4 times the difficulty of the original.
Contrary to Jason's measuring claim that the centaurs were twice as big in Anniversary, I personally don't see it.
In our defense, we did make the centaurs less cheap than they were in Tomb Raider 1. I remember playing this, and it was like they just had machine gun fireballs coming out of their arms.
Bone chips they were.
That was a bone chip?
Yeah, the whole kind of concept with the, they were all sort of firing off bits of themselves, little sacks of fiery doom and little bone chips at you.
That's a red fireball, dude. That's not a bone chip.
No, it's not a fireball, right?
Which is hilarious because the 2 of them are talking about 2 completely different things, both of which are discernible in game, but not really in the context that they're referring to.
The original one, it looks like a sort of fleshy sack that comes flying towards you, and then when it bursts, it ignites.
Oh, is that how the igniting happened?
Well, in my head, that's how it worked.
Now I suppose we should talk about Pierre, and by extension Lara's clean, bloodless hands.
So in the original game, when you actually arrive at Tihocan's tomb, basically Pierre's already there, beating you to it. He's already grabbed the Scion, so you gun him down and you take his stuff. And we decided that was, not so good. We wanted to add more significance to sort of like her first kill. We also wanted to, we didn't like the idea that Pierre sort of beat her to it. It was better that Lara actually, kind of sort of wins, but he gets the drop on her.
To be quite clear, it's not necessarily that PERU is altogether ahead of Lara in every aspect of tomb raiding. Based on how untouched environments are before Lara gets to them, it's fair to say that PERU is doing quite a bit of coasting on Lara's hard work.
We wait until she collects the other pieces. In this fashion, we have the full price at no extra effort.
The original game makes a point to have PERU be a consistent pain in Lara's backside, whereas in Anniversary, PERU mainly shows up at the beginning and at the end of her expedition, with a few voice lines in between.
Don't worry, Lara.
To me, both iterations of PERU in these games are lacking. But together, the two games' implementations of PERU make one cohesive, desirable whole. Anniversary's intro for PERU was a fantastic establishment of him as a rival for Lara. Sadly though, Anniversary doesn't really follow through with this amazing setup whatsoever, which is where the original implementation of PERU performed better. He felt more present and in the game, so to speak. In the remake, Lara and PERU have a quick-time event showdown, which I don't really mind, all things considered, given what's coming up next, and because of what they're going for story-wise. If I had to add any kind of gameplay with PERU in Anniversary, I would have inserted it back in the earlier levels. PERU puts a little too much faith in the Centaur's laser focus on the artifact and gets crushed to death for his stupidity. PERU dying as a result of once again foisting responsibility on Lara is quite appropriate. When it comes to the final combat encounter of Greece, Anniversary has my entire heart here. I think across all Tomb Raider games, this is probably my favorite boss fight, and nothing Crystal Dynamics has done since this has impressed me as much. The goal of this centaur fight is to use the centaur's shields to turn them to stone, which will allow Lara to do damage to them and dispose of them permanently. Summarized like that, it seems fairly simple, but what really stood out to me about this boss fight was how quintessentially Tomb Raider it was in terms of being a bit of a puzzle, and one that is more difficult to figure out than the previous T-Rex fight. At least in the T-Rex fight, you can inflict minuscule damage just by shooting it. The centaur fight basically demands that you figure it out, so you manage to effectively do your adrenaline dodge headshot and finally pull the shields off of the centaurs. The player still needs to have the presence of mind to think about turning these two beasts to stone. This solution is nicely telegraphed. It's simple in retrospect, but elusive on first contact. And if that's not the trademark Tomb Raider experience, adapted into a boss fight, then I don't know what is. I wish more Tomb Raider bosses could be like this. The cherry on top for me is the soundtrack that plays. It is probably my favorite action track that Mr. Folman composed for his time with Tomb Raider. This is some of Crystal's best work in my opinion. Our two ending cinematics for Greece see Lara and Lara getting a vision of past events. Anniversary Lara gets to listen in on the beginning of a conversation between the three otherworldly looking beings. Meanwhile, original Lara only gets to see a flash of these three. However, she does get more visuals, highlighting the journey that the next piece of the Scion takes through the world, with contextual images of it being flung into Egypt. Anniversary Lara only has the meager image of it floating into a nondescript mining cave, which honestly isn't much to go on, so I really have no idea how she gets a lead from that. Either way, our two ladies hop on a motorbike, and with that, we are finally done with Greece.
Anniversary.
Take that hot shower.
Anniversary's delivery of the final two levels of the original Greece is actually my pick. The streamlining of certain parts really helps it keep the final stretch of the Greek adventure focused. The puzzle in the cistern was still really good even if it wasn't as complex as the originals in terms of scope. And you already know how I feel about the boss fight. That alone just rockets Anniversary's Tomb of Tihocan into the sky. I appreciate the concept of Egypt, but it's never been my favorite location in these games. Maybe it's all the sand. The original version for this first level is remarkably well represented in Anniversary. Sure, the gameplay intricacies are different as they always are, but it would appear that every major room has been faithfully replicated to where nothing felt absent in Anniversary, and it's all correctly in sequence too. Anniversary doesn't even add much extra to this level, in terms of detours. So we enter into this first room and OG Lara has to pull a lever to access a block which will get her to the next room. Anniversary Lara is more about destruction in this instance, as she pulls down structures which also lets her access a block with which she can progress. This first large Sphinx area in both games is undeniably different in layout and structure, and while playing both back to back, I can say that the original in this case did definitely feel much smaller. It is also objectively simpler to get past. But funnily enough, I can also say that I recall my first playthrough of this game had me spend a fair bit longer in this room than I would in subsequent playthroughs. In Anniversary, however, there was no such elongated exploration process. The less interactive mechanics of platforming do a lot to direct the player in the right direction, and almost immediately you will know what the way forward is on this pillar. Now the next room is more of Anniversary Lara's struggle, because OG Lara kind of just kills one panther and goes on her merry way. Anniversary adds more panthers and a timed run across these dudes holding the tables in order to make some calculated jumps to enter the next room.
We really liked the idea of the statues moving very early on, so that sort of became the theme of how we wanted to recreate this room, was put the statues in but then make them move about.
That's the theme of this whole Egypt level, isn't it? You guys went move crazy. It's good.
We eventually get to what I refer to as the Crocodile Pond, a room in which there isn't much going on, but the original at least has the edge in trying to crush you with a rogue boulder. The way ahead in both is through the pond itself, bringing you to the room of narrow bridges. The original puts focus on the block that's on the bridge and how Lara will use it to get to her required destinations. In the remake, this room is more about speed and skillfully made jumps, as the bridges now move as you cross them. We get out of the bridge room and onto its roof, which looks much better in the original, I will say. You pull the lever which drops the trapdoors which surround the cat statue. Under the cat, the original tries to be a bit of an asshole and kill the player in one of these side paths. The girls deal with the panthers at the bottom and undergo their trials in order to arrive on the high platform on the opposite end from where they entered, and a big room with an unreachable hallway located high above under a trapdoor of some kind. The goal here is to drop the sand from above into the room below. The same quest in both games. This involves moving through the room with the sitting statues again, except from the top. A few more jumps and our girls are in the same spot. The only task left for the original Lara is to insert a very easily found key that she picked up on the way into a slot which sees her to the end of the level. Anniversary Lara needs no such key, a quality I've begun to appreciate, and she proceeds straight into the next room, which is the beginning of the next level in the original.
You come into a room and there's these six blocks and you can pull them out and it's basically either a reward or a punishment. And actually they were all punishments apart from one, which was the thing you were here to grab. It seemed like a fun sort of little thing to do. So obviously you guys did something different this time.
We kept the blocks and the sort of little side rooms off of it as a key to exiting the room, but we sort of added a combination lock type thing to the door, which sort of was our effort to both update the room and also to give fictionally sort of more meaning to actually getting through the room and getting into the next area, which is the big obelisk area. Sort of by making it more difficult to get into that area, it sort of gives more significance to the next part.
This one is kind of tough to rank. The two iterations being so similar up until the end, I really need to be nitpicky to even separate the two. The original and remaster have the better visuals for sure. Anniversary is of course more intricate and takes a little more adept button pressing. The original, on the other hand, makes the gears in your head turn a little more. That is until we get to Anniversary's final puzzle room, which I'm tempted to exclude from this judgment.
Anniversary.
Pink.
The vibes are just better with Anniversary in my mind. The room we just did in Anniversary is now available in Tomb Raider 1, and it is a bit more integrated into this level as a result. While in Anniversary we needed to solve the little combination puzzle to open a big centered door, Tomb Raider 1 instead needs Lara to find a key in one of these rooms in order to open a much smaller door located just outside the room back near the entrance. There's only 4 blocks this time. 2 of them feature dead ends with a couple of cats and are only really good for a pickup. The third one slides Lara into a large room with a panther at the bottom. Despite how large this room is, I can see why they didn't bother to include it in Anniversary, as not only is it not significant to the task at hand, but its overall layout is already similar to a couple more rooms we'll be dealing with a bit later. The final room behind the 4th block features a pool with a croc, and houses both pickups and the key that we need. This room also seems to have been cut out, and again I can't totally blame them as the layout is also familiar to the previous level's room with the overhead bridges. You know the one. We've got our key and use it to open the door, which takes us into the main attraction, the Obelisk. A bit of a daunting room in Anniversary, but deceptively simple looking in the original. Now our 2 ladies are back in sync. They'll be taking a detour to the base of the room to enter another opening down there. Here we find our first major challenge, the Room of Many Jumps.
In Tomb Raider 1, Lara, sort of one of the only difficult things that she could do was make these really large jumps. And so this area was an area where Lara had to sort of leap precariously back and forth between platforms, sort of sticking out along the walls of this room. Now that our current Lara in Tomb Raider Anniversary is way sort of more nimble and attaches to ledges and hangs on a whole lot easier, we had to sort of figure out a way to make a room themed around sort of this large ascent and precarious jumping over a large drop, but still sort of keep it challenging for the player. So we sort of made a fairly more complicated room. We sort of themed around these broken sort of floors of a large chamber that had broken away, and just sort of pillars were remaining that Lara had to traverse up.
This room in the original is pretty simple, assuming the player is cool with the jumping mechanics. In the remake, however, this room could potentially break you, especially if you try for the secret at the top. Your first turtle might be getting annoyed at her for not grabbing the edge of a ledge like she's supposed to, or once again trying to conquer the dreaded wall jump. On a positive note, I do like that Anniversary had a nice bit of colorful illustration here. You'll have noticed by now that the vibrance of Anniversary isn't quite as standout as it is in the original, but this room's artistic quality kind of impressed me. The illustration in particular isn't present here in the original, but that's probably because it seems to be taken from a later part of the level. Anyway, as OG Lara reaches the top of her climb, she gets to pull her switch, but it's probably a good idea to deal with the mummy ahead before you do that. Anniversary Lara has no choice but to deal with the mummy first, before going through a small hallway to reach the same switch. I'll call this the Room of the Big Slide. Keeping things simple, both Laras can go down the initial slide to the bottom and pull the switch tucked away in one of these little openings. This converts the slide into some steps, which Lara can better traverse upward, but only classic Lara is going to see any real use of these steps for now. Both Laras go through their own trials in getting upward, with Anniversary enduring some tough timed wall runs that will really test your skill and understanding of the mechanic. It took me like a dozen tries to deal with this particular timed wall in my first playthrough, and I still end up getting damaged here, so do with that what you will. Fast forward a bit and our Laras have succeeded. At this point, both of the girls have freed up enough bridge space to where once they get back into the main obelisk room, they have access to the third and final main room of the challenge in a variety of ways.
We decided early on that we wanted to make Egypt sort of themed around lots of difficult traps. So while we wanted to keep sort of the gameplay in a lot of the rooms very similar to how it was in Tomb Raider 1, we felt that we could spice up long, boring hallways with a good amount of traps, which both made them more interesting and also gave us an opportunity to challenge the player.
This room. In the original, the traps are noticeably absent. It really feels like a dead, abandoned tomb in that sense. Whereas in Anniversary, the developers have really given the players the devious option of jumping onto this hanging wall ornament, which in previous parts of the level have usually done something productive. But not here though. This singular switch will activate a gauntlet of slicing blades all along the walls of this previously dead room, which could potentially cause the player to rip their hair out. So the more prudent option would be to take this route down to the bottom of the room in both games. From here though, it is a simple matter in the original to make a simple jump to this opening here, taking Lara to a switch near the side of the water in the Obelisk room. Anniversary would have also had such a simple path if it weren't for the Crystal Dynamics' intent to once again place the player in mortal danger. This particular trap sequence is one of the most annoying in my opinion, even as someone who generally knows the ins and outs of this game's more finicky moments. Lara's balancing and landing on these poles always feels like a toss-up. If there is a reliably methodical way to do it, then please educate me in the comments. But the fact that I have yet to figure out any consistent triggers for Lara stumbling on these poles is probably the biggest indictment on the platforming conventions of the LAU trilogy and Anniversary. We get to the same switch, and with the final bridge dropped, we need only ascend back up this cursed room, which would of course be especially difficult had you unwittingly activated the traps. We raid the obelisk, and the way out of the room opens below the water. Now the original takes you on one of the longest swims of the game, especially if you go for the pickups along the way. Anniversary being what it is though, the swim couldn't be much longer than it usually is, what with Lara having a limited lung capacity like a normal human being. The next couple of rooms aren't interesting gameplay wise, but in the original they at least showcase a bit of art, and what the back of the initial Sphinx looks like. Meanwhile, Anniversary Lara has opened up a pathway back to the room of sitting statues from the previous level, at which point it's theoretically possible to go back through the Temple of Khamoon and do an entire circuit, but I couldn't be bothered to test that theory. It's an impressive feat though, to have all these levels be congruous and traversable from front to back, which Underworld will eventually take advantage of. Our Laras have now returned to the initial smaller obelisk back in the Sphinx room, and with all 4 keys in hand, we have the means to open the entrance to the next and final level of the Egypt section. Hurrah!
Tomb Raider 1.
No problem.
So this might be a victory for the original on the basis of comfort and enjoyability alone. I'm sure for those who are predisposed to a good challenge in the old trap corridors of Anniversary might see them as a positive, but a couple of those trap rooms are just a nightmare that aren't really satisfying enough to give them the points they need. The opening puzzle room is superior in Anniversary, including the way it cuts out some less than necessary extra rooms from the original. Anniversary's traversal between rooms is also superior in my opinion, but the greater sense of freedom and exploration in the original is still a tough contender. And the sporadic difficulty of some of the traps is still a big detriment to Anniversary. It's close, but the OG wins this one. We have arrived at the final level of Egypt, and one of the most impressive ones of the game if I do say so myself. At the top of the stairs, classic Lara faces a simple elevated pillar which will lead up through a hole in the ceiling. Meanwhile in Anniversary, Lara finds that her pillar is buried in the floor and she must solve what I like to call a light Rubik's Cube style puzzle in order to make it ascend. I remember this being the puzzle that stumped me for the longest time back when I first played Anniversary. Classic Lara's already climbed out of the ceiling and finds herself on the back of this rather large structure. After the typical trap room hallway, Anniversary Lara also ends up finding herself here. This is one of the 2 feature rooms of this level, and one that the devs need to talk about.
Alright Toby, why don't you tell us why there are 2 sphinxes? One in the beginning and a big one here.
When we first spec'd out the Egypt area, it was actually, once you put the pieces into the obelisk, the doors open and it literally just revealed a room that had the Scion in it. But I was really disappointed with the way that the Sphinx had looked. So actually, on one weekend, I came in and built like the largest Sphinx I could possibly build, right? It was so cool looking, basically. We just added this, we added it in and turned it into the actual final part of the Egypt area. What I liked about it was the way that you approached it, because the obvious thing would be that you approach it from an angle whereby you can sort of see it from the front or see it from below and get a really good sense of the scale of it. But I wanted to actually come up onto it so that you didn't understand what you were standing on, so that you kind of, it took your mind a while as you walked around it to appreciate that you're actually standing on the back of the Sphinx. Essentially, it's hidden from you because of its scale.
And the fog.
Yes, and the fog.
The aesthetics of this room are quite different between the original and remake, with the remake not only desaturating the giant cavern, but also giving it a more preserved and put-together appearance. The man-made architecture is far more integrated into the cavern in Anniversary, while the original requires Lara to traverse what could be interpreted as just rock formations that expand out from the cave walls. Our goal here remains unchanged: open the door in the center of the Sphinx by collecting the 2 required Ankh keys. The keys are located in rooms placed on either side of the cavern. In the original, the doors to these rooms are fairly easy to reach, but they're locked at first, so the player will need to do some platforming on the left and right sides of the cavern to open them. In Anniversary, these rooms don't have doors, but the way to reach them requires just as much platforming as the switches in the original. The original is as usual more methodical in the careful jumps it requires from the player, lest they fall and break their legs. Flying Atlantean mutants accost Lara on occasion. Specifically, in the original, they get summoned at particular trigger points, potentially catching the player off guard or in a tight spot. In Anniversary, there are 2 mutants looking for a fight on the 2 highest platforms on either side of the room. So not as unexpected in their call to action, and unlike in the original, they can throw fireballs at you while they are flying. So with both Laras achieving access to the 2 side rooms, I find it prudent to begin with the one on the Sphinx's right side. This area in the original is best representative of what both rooms have been converted to in Anniversary.
I ended up essentially taking a bunch of my test rooms that really pushed Lara's movement to the max, that were basically exploited more interesting combinations of moves and whacked them in as these side rooms around the outside. They were some more interesting sort of movement puzzles.
The original one side was just sort of pushing a block through a wall, and sort of you had to figure out which way to push the block, and then the other room was themed around sort of sliding down and jumping at the right time onto this bridge, which worked really well for Tomb Raider 1, but is very easy to do in Tomb Raider Anniversary. So we sort of completely changed the rooms and came up with a brand new puzzle involving the obelisks and the light, and sort of themed both the rooms similarly to sort of try to give the area sort of a theme.
I actually enjoy both interpretations of this room in both games, but I will admit that the Anniversary version did leave a bit more room for thought when it came to the sequence of how best to proceed in lifting the prisms. Lara must weigh down the 4 long rectangular slabs in the different corners of the room, and you could potentially screw yourself over if you do them in the wrong order. As you weigh down each one, the previously noted bridge from the original extends to reach the door which holds Lara's prize. We send our girls over to their next room, which is mildly disappointing in 2 different ways. For the original, it's a room which only features a simple block that Lara needs to push and hop onto to access her second Ankh key. For Anniversary Lara, it's an almost exact carbon copy of the previous room. While I understand the rationale of realistically the 2 rooms having the same architecture, it is a video game and creativity tends to be better than realism when it comes to gameplay. I still appreciate the attempts to offer a new spin on these rooms while still incorporating familiar elements, like how Lara still needs to do a bunch of repetitive jumps to accomplish her goal, or like how pulling out these structures with rings on them will allow the player to ascend higher. Abstract similarities, but they get the idea across. We finally gain access to the center of the Sphinx, with original Lara climbing atop the head to put the keys in, while Anniversary Lara boringly just walks up to the door. At least in Anniversary, you get to grab a little bit of fun by rolling this ball over these rats in this loading hallway. And so, we dive into the second feature area of this level. The grand statues of who I think are Horus and Set, or maybe it could be Anubis? I'm not sure. He's got the long snoot thing.
I come in another weekend and built even larger sitting down dudes, basically Horus and Osiris.
No, that's not right.
You drop down it and you literally dropped into a room with 2 statues that are even more vast than where you came from, and that sort of reveal of actually. And because it was water-filled when you dropped in there, you kind of only really saw them when you dived underwater, and you essentially were flying around these massive statues, I thought was a pretty cool way to introduce them.
I never noticed this before this playthrough, but the statues switch sides in the remake. As we can see, this place is massive, and since our Laras need to swim around to find things, it's best that we get straight to our goal right away. The first step in getting through this room is draining most of the water, and both games have contrasting methods for doing this. The original requires that Lara swim between Set's feet to pull a lever, opening him up to receive most of the water in this massive room and pushing Lara inside of him to surface somewhere in his brain or something. Anniversary Lara must instead head to the middle of the center of the room to find her own lever, which drains the water to the statue's feet. Her path takes her into Set's lab, where you need to do a fairly rudimentary scarab puzzle in order to open the gate in his chest. At this point, I like to take a little shortcut and head straight over to Horus's lab and solve his scarab puzzle based off my own traumatized memory. Classic Lara, in the meantime, continues on her way to come out on top of Horus. Pulling the switch on Set grants Lara access to the door between Horus's legs, while in Anniversary, the same switch lets Lara enter Set's chest. We do a little bit of upward platforming to finally end up on top of him. The insides of Horus in the original are a bit less than remarkable. Very much a long hallway in the vein of Anniversary, except marginally more boring. Once Anniversary Lara gets to the top and pulls a switch to force the water level to take her to the room's highest opening, she has her own set of long hallways to deal with. Classic Lara finds herself a scarab key at the end of her long upward ascent, which is needed to open a gate at the very beginning of the level, which, thankfully, the game has already been kind enough to put us there. It's at this point that both Laras face arguably their toughest fights of this section of the game. OG Lara places her recently acquired scarab into the slot, which I guess was referenced in Anniversary by the more innovative implementation of the scarab puzzle. And it is here that our ladies are now at the final stretch of their Egyptian adventure.
In the original, you sort of came down and got this one key, and then you were able to go all the way back up to the top, to the stairs, and then go into a little side room, and then the Scion was way up there. But we really wanted to sort of recreate this area as sort of a vault at the bottom of the entire sort of Egypt level. And part of that was us sort of making access into the very back where you actually can get the third piece of the Scion, gated by the other two pieces of the Scion, almost like they were a key to that you needed before you could gain access to it.
Which makes more sense from a story point of view, basically.
Absolutely.
Classic Lara's challenge here is both simpler and more violent. Larson is hiding in wait to ambush her, instead of just picking up the Scion himself. But since defeating him here is rather incongruous with our Anniversary storyline, I actually decide to go ahead and let him live, but not before kicking him in the balls or something first. Our girls pick up the Scion and hightail it out of the tomb. Lara takes this opportunity to combine the final piece with the other two, an activity which I think she should have waited to do when she was I don't know, in a nice hotel room or something. Nevertheless, she gets a vision of Natla's trial from a billion years ago, and I'll just go ahead and throw in the original's version of events here in advance. I love both iterations of the scene for slightly different reasons. I dig the sci-fi alien look in the original as well as the grand fantasy type angle they go for in Anniversary. Putting Lara in the scene is a nice touch as well, since it paints a nice picture about how imposing the Atlanteans are compared to the mere mortals of the human world. This scene also has some of my favorite voice lines in both games.
Neither of you have one squirt of inventive juice in your heads. Wasters.
Let's just do it. Condemn you to shame in the frozen limbo of eternity. Wreak your eternal unrest, Natla!
You won't rest either, or your damned continent will find you both. I rise from the dust of your bones to finish what I've started.
Following this, Lara snuck up on by Natla's crew. In Anniversary because she was lost in the sauce, and in the original because she's blinded by light or something. The Anniversary Lara takes the opportunity to question Natla on some lore points which are relevant to the Legend trilogy. She is not very forthcoming, however, and both Natlas tell her thugs to execute Miss Croft, which they of course fail as Lara does her signature swan dive into the body of water conveniently located below.
I do my best thinking counting
off, please?
A big shout out to Larson in the remake, who does her the favor of not shooting her at point blank range with a shotgun and letting her dive away scot-free. Lara finds her bike, which technically means she must have trekked back to the entrance to Khamoon in enough time to give chase, which is somewhat unbelievable, but let's go with it. She speeds over to the pier in both games via cutscene. The girls do their daringly badass leap from the bike, Anniversary Lara taking the initiative to grapple the boat because there is physically no way she was going to catch up to it by just swimming. The two Laras emerge from the water, and we can appreciate the irony of how OG Lara was fully dripping wet as she boarded the boat, while Anniversary didn't bother paying attention to that little detail. She takes the opportunity to stow away in a storage container and take a nap. And so ends our Egyptian adventure. I hate Egypt.
Tomb Raider 1.
Great.
This opening puzzle for Anniversary was either a blessing or a curse depending on who you are. For me, it was a curse, but objectively, maybe TR fans are into it. The traversal around the big Sphinx room was better in the original. Puzzle rooms for the Sphinx's Ankh keys end up tying for my affection in either game. I like the more involved puzzle in Anniversary, but wasn't a huge fan of the repeat, whereas I like the variety in the original, but they are a lot simpler objectively. In the original, the flooded statue room was mainly navigation, while Anniversary put more puzzle elements in there to spice things up. If I'm being honest here, Anniversary's Egypt as a whole objectively had a lot more to it in puzzles, in combat, and in platforming. However, when it comes to the execution of it all, it ends up not feeling as nice to play as the original, despite having more of what makes a puzzle platformer challenging. Perhaps it's another lesson in less being more when it comes to player experience. I'm open to disagreements on this since it was another tough choice, but the original just felt nicer to play for me.
Ain't nothing personal.
We have entered the mines.
It was it's one of the places where we actually did manage to sort of show a bit of the fiction of the world, having Natla technology, crates everywhere, and you know her minions have been mining away at the site trying to uncover the secrets of the past. And we built into that. We also used this in the first game as obviously, you know, having your weapons removed, adding to the sense of fear of the area, basically. But one of the weird things about it was that there was nothing really stopping you from missing the whole section out, running forwards. Basically, there was the cowboy guy who is sort of got merged with Larson in the remake. He was basically standing in a room or waiting for you. If you went in there without guns, he would pretty much shoot you to pieces. But it was still possible to actually basically run past him if you had enough health packs, and then carry on and not ever do any of it.
We wanted to sort of refine the mines down to a sort of more manageable set of gameplay area. A lot of people, I think, found the mines to be fairly confusing to play through, so we really simplified it down to a couple of key areas that were sort of thematically the same as the original, and then still kept the fight with the now merged Larson / cowboy character at the end, but you can't run through it anymore.
Playing through these two versions of this level really did highlight the point Jason made about simplifying the mines. Tomb Raider 1's mine does naturally have the greater vastness that the classic games present in terms of feeling like you're in a sprawling complex. Whereas Anniversary, while the area is large, its layout is far more contained and mentally manageable, which in this case ends up coming across as a negative when your main source of entertainment is solving the area as a sort of puzzle. That being said, the original mines, while a bit more confusing due to the back and forth of pulling a lever here to open a door to another lever there, isn't necessarily all that perplexing or demanding of complex thought. Still, it at least keeps the mind more active, utilizes the entire complex of caves, and is nicely punctuated by little block pushing segments or this race against an incoming boulder. All this in an effort for Lara to retrieve her lost pistols, so that she can finally dispatch the cowboy man. But of course, as has been mentioned, running past him and chugging medpacks is also a viable-ish strategy. And we appreciate the opportunity to make foolish player choices in this way. Anniversary, of course, adopting the more streamlined approach, requires the player to retrieve their guns in order to even reach the point where Lara battles Cowboy Man. The back and forth this time is centered around using the fuses that Lara finds to manipulate a container on a crane, which allows Lara to reach different parts of the mining tunnels. In the original, the fuses were merely key items in the control room, which you didn't need to think about until you had all three to insert into their slots, dropping the elevated container, which has Lara's guns. I like the added mechanical interactivity of Anniversary. These kinds of small-scale mechanism-based puzzles is something Crystal Dynamics tend to do very well in implementing. I just wish they didn't sacrifice so much in the way of making the areas more complex puzzles in of themselves. Both of the Laras succeed in their task by either dropping the container onto the room in which the pistols are stored, or by dropping the room itself onto the floor. While original Lara has already cleared a way through to the lava chasm to face the cowboy, Anniversary Lara must first use her guns to access the secondary control room to get the drill up and running. Her use of it is then interrupted by Larson as he's sabotaged the track while Lara was away.
So, coming to rework or rewrite the story for Anniversary, basically the goal was not to rewrite it, but to invest it with some kind of emotional depth. And the point of the story became very quickly how far Lara will go for her obsession, how morally she's willing to stretch herself in order to actually just achieve her goals, because she's extremely single-minded. And the Larson character, therefore, expanded into the real test for her of, you know, are you going to shoot some guy just in order to get what you want? And I think that in games, most people don't actually think about what they're actually doing. They're kind of literally taking someone's life in order to achieve their goals. And I wanted, because we had so little in the way of human killing in Tomb Raider 1, the remake gave us an opportunity to really focus on what a difficult choice that really should be for a person. And so Larson is a very ambiguous character. He's sort of quite a nice guy, sort of. He's an enemy, but he helps Lara a little bit on the sly. Obviously likes her a bit. They have a bit of chemistry going, although obviously Lara has no interest really. And it was this point where we wanted to actually really connect the player with the experience of they want to move forward, Lara wants to move forward, and this guy essentially is standing in the way. We basically create the super action. Instead of it being really for gameplay, it's really for an emotional connection of the player with this act that is basically Lara stepping too far over the line, over the moral line, and taking down this guy and feeling bad about it.
My hot take is that I am actually pretty satisfied with the point that they tried to get across in Anniversary regarding Lara's morality in murdering other people for her goals. This being one of her earliest adventures in this timeline, and her hands being relatively clean so far, especially with her not having murked Pierre herself. It's a more believable execution of how someone like Lara Croft would end up having to deal with this conflict as opposed to what the 2013 reboot portrays. At least in my opinion. Amazingly enough, her body count in this story is far, far less than the much younger reboot Lara's was in 2013, despite classic Lara already taking on far greater threats than mere humans. The only improvement I'd have suggested is to foreshadow a bit more of this internal conflict earlier in the story, to make the whole "that's just not who you are" line hit a bit more appropriately. It's giving that one scene from Divergent.
Why would I tell you that? It's not like you're gonna shoot me.
Why do people keep saying that?
I think that this should have been the last time they attempted to do this character angle for Lara. Sadly, it won't be, and I find that it may well be to Crystal Dynamics' detriment. It's often noted that Crystal tends to have some hubris in trying to reinvent classic Tomb Raider elements into what they consider to be a better version. It's not just that they retread old ground for classic Lara, but they do it for their own versions of Lara as well, to the point where even Anniversary's Lara's development gets redone in debatable ways by reboot Lara. And of course, who knows where the unified version of her character will end up. I will compliment their choice to streamline or merge the existence of Larson and the cowboy into one character. It lets them both be more of a character in Anniversary rather than two throwaway goons that get unalived unceremoniously. I can even forgive the QuickTime event execution since this is Lara's first proper murder, and well, combat gameplay with armed humans in Crystal Dynamics games isn't that great anyway. So we're in the lava chasms now, and boy oh boy does Anniversary cut out most of it. I have no excuses for it here. Sure, the specifics of traversing the magma pit might be a little tricky, but it's a straightforward path, let's be honest. Original Lara's got a whole room to platform on. Her shimmying and jumping have to be more careful. She has to take a longer way around the rock formations to even reach the same river that Anniversary just handed the player after they murdered Larson. Yes, the platforming is simpler even by classic Tomb Raider standards, but hey, at least the secret on the right side opening is way more innovative. When both Laras get to the other side of the river, Anniversary Lara is gonna need to take a bit of a break here, cause classic Lara has far more to do. There's a neat little TNT bit where you have to blow open the path forward, which should have totally gotten represented in Anniversary. And no, using the drill to demolish this barrier to get through here doesn't count as the same thing. This explosive bit is especially memorable because it's another one of the fewer moments where the player gets to alter the room in a way that required the devs to get a bit more creative in their level design. The fact that getting the TNT box in a position to blow up the cave also serves as a way for Lara to even get to the detonator is excellent design efficiency. And then to classic Lara's next boss fight, versus the Kid. I would have been quite curious to see what Anniversary would have interpreted this area as being. After defeating the unremarkable young man on his skateboard, we get through more caves with more boulder traps, which... Look, Anniversary doesn't have enough boulder traps, okay? I mean, it's a mine. Make something explode, throw some rocks at her. They went crazy in the Egypt levels with, you know, the very sharp, spiky traps. Now let's have some variety, some boulders. Come on, now the only boulder that Anniversary had was like in the Tomb of Qualopec. So then, classic Lara has to do a whole climbing section and then a block puzzle room. It's just a lot of content and nowhere to be seen in the remake. This must have been crunch time to the max because these sections are memorable parts of the original. I know every one of us would have had vivid memories of being trapped in a peach-orange maze trying desperately to find our way out. It's shameful, really. So the peach block puzzle throws classic Lara out in front of the main underground pyramid to Atlantis. And finally, Anniversary Lara is back in action. She will have to deal with the Kid in addition to who classic Lara now needs to take down.
Originally, the Kid and fight with the shotgun guy, who I think didn't even have a name in Tomb Raider 1, who's now called Kincaid. So they were sort of separated, and when we were remaking the game, the notion of a guy on a skateboard in this underground skate park seemed sort of ridiculous.
It was pretty funny though in the original, I thought.
So we removed the skateboard boss fight from the game and instead combined that with the fight with the shotgun guy outside of the pyramid, which I think is sort of was a good decision.
Yeah, and this is the fight that we really went all out on in terms of the cinematic and how intense the whole thing was. Partially because the previous fight with Larson was basically just shooting it, and it was basically extremely simple in terms of the setup. It's much more of an emotional thing. So we wanted to turn Kid and Cole's fight into this massive, extravaganza, I suppose.
While I can forgive Anniversary for not featuring gameplay fights for the previous human enemies, this is where that forgiveness ends. As per usual, her fight is done in the form of QuickTime events, and it's honestly a wasted opportunity. Lara has now been freshly introduced to her life as a murderer, so the time for dramatic close-up shots and filling dudes with lead via QuickTime events is over. I think they definitely could have done a bare minimum and reused a lot of behaviors from previous enemies to make an extra boss fight. What could make the fight really creative, however, is if you needed to use the two against each other. It would be totally on brand with how the other bosses in the game already work, and would transition perfectly into the cutscene where ultimately the two men kill each other off. Well, I guess it's time for Anniversary Lara to actually do something. Before her, we have the Great Pyramid, the entrance to which must be opened by pushing down the marked pillars scattered across the sloped surface and then pulling the switch at the top. Classic Lara must also jump on the sloped surface, but the switch she pulls instead gives her access to a key which will open a door at the base of the pyramid itself, thus ending the level.
Tomb Raider 1.
I'm sorry.
Original, next. Maintain no illusions that Anniversary will have more content than the original at any point in these remaining levels. Lara and Lara enter the pyramid and the layout is quite similar, a long hallway with Atlantean eggs lining the walls on the left and right. The original has them emerge as you proceed. In Anniversary, Natla activates the pyramid only once Lara reaches the far end of the hallway, and only on her way back do the eggs pop.
When we were working out the baddies for the first game, we wanted to have some supernatural sort of creatures, but at the same time, I didn't want a muddied and confused sort of that magic is, anything can sort of happen type of game. And so the concept of these Atlantean creatures came along, and we used those to be both the mummies and the centaurs and so forth, and we kind of sort of disguised them for the earlier levels in Egypt. They're sort of, if you first see them, they're really well bandaged, and then later on, as the level progresses, their bandages fall off, and you see that there's nasty things going on underneath, and then finally you get to the last level, and you find out that these things are actually being sort of birthed inside the pyramid. So
the Atlanteans were smart enough to make crazy, rabid creatures, but not smart enough to make skin, huh?
Well, they're gonna die anyways.
One step closer.
Armies.
So the center of the pyramid was sort of this giant shaft that went up the middle. In the original game, Lara just sort of jumped from one sort of periphery room to the other off of this main area. And so we really wanted to get Lara back into this big, vast space with the constant fear of falling into the lava in the bottom. And so we sort of cut all of the side rooms off and ended up actually taking some of them and reordering the areas and putting them later in the level.
And I quite honestly don't mind the concept. It can be annoying specifically because of how cheap the flying Atlantean mutants can be, but overall it's a neat little Prince of Persia-esque section. But the amount of game time one gets out of it will ultimately pale in comparison to the side rooms from the original. So Anniversary has a lot of missing time to make up for. So for the sake of comparison, I will go over those areas from Anniversary at the same time we go through them in the original. We have this narrow room with a long bridge and lava at the bottom. It's the first room on our ascent in the original, but in Anniversary it's the first room you get to after the next level's opening boss fight. I found this jump oddly evasive in both iterations, since in the original it's a run and jump which doesn't really leave any room for being off even slightly. Meanwhile in Anniversary, the jump all but demands Lara to really stretch out for it. Tomb Raider 1 stays winning by leading the player out into this flooded room which appears to be on one of the sides of the underground pyramid. Through the door, over the lava flow and into the next hallway, and you arrive back out at the center shaft to cross over to the next opening. Meanwhile, in Anniversary... So next on the docket, we have the room of the 3 underwater doors inside of a cross-shaped pool. Also present in the remake, Lara must pull switches located in the corners of the room to open the underwater doors. Naturally, Anniversary makes this bit a little more intricate. The idea is essentially the same. Though to be fair, this room is also extended by the room directly next to it. Going off of the presence of this movable block, I'm going to assume it's the room directly after the pool room in the original, which is this funny little boulder puzzle. The idea here is that the boulder rolls down and blocks the way forward unless Lara uses this block to stop it from doing so. In Anniversary, this little boulder situation is wiped away, surprise surprise, in favor of simply needing to use the block to get to a higher position, which Lara can use to make her way around the room to find the last switch in the pool room. With that, original Lara is back to the center shaft. Pressing forward with OG Lara, we have this room with 2 slopes heading down into a spike pit. Then we have this treacherous looking room, with the large orifice ominously presiding over this fleshy bridge of sorts. We move up further and it's back to the central shaft. This next room is also rather unremarkable and is one of the few that I can see being an understandable cut. It's an old set of level design, which has already been executed better in previous sections of the game. Now, the original is giving us hallways, and you know Anniversary never shies away from an opportunity to give us a hallway. though sadly it's not even giving us as many hallways as the original does. OG Lara goes up another level on the shaft and features another hallway, mainly filled with traps. Anniversary does bother to somewhat replicate this one with a few more wall traps on the side, but of course, no boulders. In the original, this room houses the very large square seats for the 3 former rulers of Atlantis, and the main attraction here is these 2 switches which throw Lara down a couple of devious trap rooms in order to open the way out of said throne room. This room is, of course, not available in the remake, as the seats have instead been relocated up where the Scion is being held. Now we can finally let Anniversary Lara do something again, what is famously known as the Doppelganger room. The way out cannot be accessed without dispatching your fleshy bacon clone, and the method for doing this is fairly consistent in both games. Anniversary, of course, just makes you do a bit more fiddling with the odd gameplay intricacies to get it done.
We had this concept, well, in the original one of, Lara meeting her, ultimate nemesis, a copy of her spawned by the pyramid under Natla's orders that did exactly what she did. And I remember I thought it was really bizarre. I really liked this character because the doppelganger was a super skinny version of Lara, so naked that she didn't even have skin on. And I wanted to have this sort of this real kind of repulsion, but at the same time caricatured her towards the manga sort of sense of what is attractive. So really big eyes and big cute big cute manga eyes and stuff like this. So that when you got to look at her, it was the most disturbing thing that you could possibly see. You see this mirror of yourself. Yeah, it's great.
You're sick.
Talk about being your own worst enemy.
And finally we have this room, where in the center straight ahead is Lara's goal, the Scion. The player must pull the switches on either side of the room to open a door and pull forth the bridge in the center. In the original, this is a bit of a timed run. However, Anniversary opts for making this more of a precarious challenge with the traps and annoying flying mutants. We are at the end of this level, and while I could give a verdict on the 2 different approaches, I think it would be fairer if I waited until the end and just combined the review for Tomb Raider 1's final 2 levels with Tomb Raider Anniversary's final 2 levels. Since the elements of these levels have been mixed and rearranged in Anniversary, I don't think I can adequately cast judgment before both of the Great Pyramid levels are complete.
Well, Lara really has sort of reached her goal. You can't ask for better than what Natla offers to her. Essentially, it's not just all of the knowledge that she could ever want of the past, but it's also sort of real ultimate power, right? So,
and the culmination of sort of her father's quest to find these
artifacts. Her father's quest, and then, it leads into the mother's quest from Legend as well. So it's really major, and because we'd pushed how far she was willing to go earlier on with Larson, I wanted really for the player to wonder, even though it's basically a remake, therefore we know what choice she's going to make, that she fundamentally is a good person, that would be a really tough choice for her to make. When she does finally throttle back from her own obsessions and choose the good path, I think it makes it a real moment.
The conversations here differ in that original Natla is just giving Lara a rundown of her operations since Lara's clearly earned it, while Anniversary Natla gives Lara a job offer to be another queen of Atlantis with her.
It takes 3 to rule. You have the strength to claim this seat beside me.
Which really makes you wonder what a world ruled by these 3 bimbos would have looked like. In either case, Lara has had enough of Natla's propositions and goes for the Scion itself, which causes Natla to retaliate and clumsily fall into the drink below.
Obviously, after you kind of understand what it is that Natla's been up to, we wanted to sort of show in the original sort of what the extremes of her sickness would create, her mental sickness. And this sort of weirdy, freaky torso boss fellow was what we came up with. I think having him sort of shuffling around after you is pretty disturbing.
I agree. He is my favorite boss in the original, and I think my favorite boss in the new one in Anniversary. He's just so gross looking, and the way he moves is all freaky and mutated. It's cool.
So the boss fight here is not great in the original. I mean, it's a bullet sponge. Very straightforward, and the most interesting thing about it is the death animation. As per usual, Anniversary goes ahead and makes it a more interesting fight, with Lara needed to shoot off its fingers so that when it charges off the cliff, Lara can shoot its remaining hand so that it too falls into the drink. Goofy ass. Now this would be where I compare the version of this level in Anniversary with the version of it in the original. But sadly, we have already gone over most of the final conflict level when we went over the Atlantis level. But just because Anniversary is almost out of content, it doesn't mean that the original is. Oh no. This is just one other instance apart from the Tomb of Tihocan, where the original Tomb Raider had an entire extra level's worth of content. A little block puzzle and some tense boulder action leads Lara back to the Scion room, since OG Lara didn't really manage to shoot it when she had the chance. Once the Scion's destroyed, we backtrack a bit to the room with the bridge and head downward through a fantastic gauntlet in an attempt to escape the now crumbling pyramid. It's a nicely long escape sequence with no shortage of traps, many of which Anniversary omits. Boulders, of course, are still absent. Anniversary, the only section in Anniversary to represent this long, elaborate gauntlet, is this one chasm over a magma pit, which to be fair can be a little dicey to maneuver through, but all things considered, it's pretty simple. Meanwhile, what the original does exceptionally well, even if the gauntlet isn't particularly difficult, is giving the player a thrilling set of moments where they can really feel immersed as a triumphant badass, defying death at every turn in elegantly bombastic ways. It's exhilarating and is something severely lacking in Anniversary's final level, the Natla boss fight. So par for the course, Anniversary's boss fight comes out ahead, but only by a thin margin, unlike in previous boss fights. The strategies between the original and remake are much the same. Jump around Natla's projectiles and fill her with as much lead as possible. Anniversary's only toss-up is trying to perform a particularly unique adrenaline dodge over Natla's head in order to target her weak spot on her back. Not exactly the most intuitive solution, since it's not like the game makes the player think they failed when they do an adrenaline dodge in the wrong direction. You might spend an eternity dodging Natla backwards and sideways without getting any results, but not quite being punished for it either. At least not consistently. The original game does have a nice big arena for the boss fight to take place in, which could inspire some creative gameplay for the adventurous. But generally, there's not much more to these two fights. Anniversary caps us off with a quick-time event to finally defeat Natla with a falling pillar, since she is otherwise immortal in this game. And with that, Lara hightails it out of there on her own. Not in the original though. We have to get Lara out of here ourselves. Not a huge task though, we just need to hop across a few pillars, slide down this slope, and maybe if you're feeling spicy, you could play the 2 expansion levels to further add insult to injury for Anniversary over how much content that game is missing. But otherwise, we now rejoin the 2 Laras as they finally end their respective journeys. Anniversary Lara contemplating her actions and ultimately being proud of her accomplishments, while original Lara just doesn't give a f. She's just out of here.
Tomb Raider 1.
Content, content, content. I can concede that Anniversary does nice things story-wise, cinematography-wise, and is still superior in delivering combat encounters, but we got a lot of stuff missing here, and at some point you're bound to notice. And it's not like it's all streamlining either. We are missing some memorable bits here, and you can really feel the crunch time. Even though not all of the original's content is amazing or unique, it still does really well with most of the stuff it tries to do. The escape from the pyramid is just chef's kiss, so it inevitably has to walk away with the win. And we are done, ladies and gentlemen. Psych, you didn't think I'd forget the bread and butter of any Tomb Raider game, did you? I know half of y'all out there forget this part of the game, and shame on you for it, because it is good, alright? It is good. Listen. In the classic games, Lara's home is most suitably done at the beginning, since they are in fact tutorial levels. But I always save Croft Manor in the CD games for last, because they provide a great opportunity to enjoy some of the rewards you may have earned from the game's secrets, most notably the additional outfits.
We had sort of recreated her home before for Tomb Raider Legend, and so we wanted to sort of expand on what we had done for that game and make an even bigger and more immersive mansion than either Tomb Raider 1 or that game.
Right, yeah. The original manor was much more of a Tudor style place, and obviously it was totally themed around getting people used to the basic controls. One area that was kind of fun was the main hall, where a bunch of crates were there originally just to sort of get you used to the idea that she can sort of vault over any different height, size changes with the press of a button. And we actually put the Ark of the Covenant in there by the front door, which luckily no one at Lucas noticed. Actually, I don't know if they have the rights to it.
Did they trademark the Ark of the Covenant?
I don't know if they can. But anyway, it was a bit cheeky because obviously, But we had to do a few of those little things.
Yeah. So while we've added the crates back in, we've left out the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes, the trademark. The trademark stuff.
Just in case it is trademarked.
Most sensible.
In TR1, there wasn't actually an area outside of the manor that you could go and explore, but there was in TR2, and people sort of liked the outdoor stuff, so we decided to add a garden to the Tomb Raider Anniversary remake of the mansion. Though in TR2, the outdoor area was an obstacle course, but since all of that gameplay is now sort of encompassed within our gym area, we wanted to do something else outside, so we decided to make a hedge maze.
And, well, I should say I do hate mazes, right? Like, I mean, that's the one rule I was trying to get across in the first game when we were working with the other level artists was don't make mazes, basically, because they just confuse people and people get lost and frustrated.
Yeah, and that was sort of one of our concerns when we were making this maze, was not just sort of making an endless row of hedges that you sort of wandered your way through aimlessly, but to really put lots of little gardens and landmarks in there so that players would be able to find their way a little bit easier.
I don't really have to say much. Anniversary's Croft Manor is pretty much the best Croft Manor that Crystal Dynamics has ever done, and in terms of the quality of Lara's homes, it is rivaled only by Tomb Raider 3's manor. They've done a brilliant job capitalizing on the manor from Tomb Raider Legend, and have presented the player a quintessential Tomb Raider experience by way of the classic key collection puzzle gameplay.
We decided that we wanted to go back and make a sort of really old school adventure gamey feeling level, a little bit unlike sort of the rest of the gameplay in Tomb Raider Anniversary. So it's all sort of really inventory based with item collection and then using those items to sort of open up new areas and whatnot.
Having whined about the overuse of key collection in the original, you can see why a level like this in Anniversary gets high marks for being very faithful to the original Tomb Raider 1, despite being something completely new. The player must find a variety of key items, which open up other areas to other key items, all in an effort to find the music box key to enter the music room and end the level. A true full circle moment as the original Tomb Raider starts Lara off in the music room.
We kept all the sort of the things in there. The piano's there, the harp is there. We did take out the workout mat though. We were questioning why you had a workout mat in her music room when we were remaking it.
It was just, why not? I mean, maybe she gets Winston to play little tunes as she's doing her forward rolls or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah, now we've moved that into the gym now. Seems like a more appropriate place for it.
Yeah.
Winston can still play some ditties.
Anniversary has fallen short of the original game in a lot of ways, but this execution of Lara's home does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of trying to make up for what the game is missing. Bonus points for having little references and Easter eggs in the books scattered throughout.
By far the most intriguing is the legend surrounding the fabled dagger of Scion and the awesome power it wields.
Anniversary.
Obviously. Alright. So, what's the verdict? Well, at this point in the video, before I give my final opinions, let's hear from the fans themselves.
It's alright, but I like the original one better.
Tomb Raider Anniversary is an underappreciated remake.
Gaming's worst remake.
Do you always feel that Crystal thought they could make the game better than Core, rather than honoring the success of its predecessors?
Sadly, that ruins it all.
I love Anniversary. For me, it was the best of both worlds.
The atmosphere, the combat, and the puzzles were top tier.
I like this game for what it is.
It's still a product of its time. Quick time events are present and feel just so out of place after playing stuff like these classic remasters lately.
I think the linearity of some levels is a bit of a problem, but I love Anniversary and I think it's a great remake.
I think Anniversary being the worst remake in gaming is a stretch. While not being the most faithful remake, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives.
It has a few frustrating moments, but it's really good.
I just prefer the original, and even more now I feel it should have been its own thing instead of killing Core's faithful
The best
remake.
way I can describe this game is like the Disney Plus Star Wars shows. They have good parts and exciting parts, but ultimately they fall short.
I like Anniversary better than Legend, but I think it's still a dumbed-down Tomb Raider adventure compared to what Core Design crafted.
I used to love Anniversary until I played the original and saw just how linear and dumbed down they made it.
Anniversary was a very good game, arguably the best Tomb Raider that Crystal Dynamics ever made.
The original was definitely more challenging and had more atmosphere, plus better soundtrack.
Overall, the experience you get from Anniversary falls short when contrasting it to the original masterpiece.
It's another game where controls have let it down.
Porting over Lara's skill set from Legend has done wonders for the game's environment.
What were originally small, unsubstantial rooms were vastly improved to be real standout events in their own right.
But the decision to simplify the stages themselves is one that I wholeheartedly disagree with.
The worst thing about Anniversary is the high number of reductions and cuts made from Tomb Raider 1.
But it still delivers smart puzzles, great level design, and exploration that feels genuinely rewarding.
I don't like the gameplay and how boring and one-dimensional it is. Many things could have been handled a lot better, especially compared to the original game.
I think the problem is that old school gameplay styles from the original series just didn't translate all that well to this new era.
I could keep lashing the game for all kinds of stuff, but I'm judgmentally biased against it because it's a remake and I think remakes are bloody stupid.
And look, I'm not saying that it's a completely bad game or anything. It is not.
That was awesome. That was a really, really good game. Definitely some minor hiccups at the end, but...
I love this. I really enjoyed it.
I really do think that Tomb Raider Anniversary is one of the better remakes that I've played.
I think they did a great job at capturing the vibe from the first game, but still enhancing it in a way.
It's lost a little bit of its edge from the original, but it just plays really nicely.
If I had to list them, I would say this game would be at the top, then I'd get the remastered game second.
It will not completely replace the original, but should be experienced.
An authentic Tomb Raider experience without it being completely ancient and whatnot.
A sadly hollow imitation that I cannot enjoy or recommend.
Ultimately though, I still feel I can recommend Anniversary to everyone who's watching this video.
She didn't live up to the expectations I had after 11 years, but she's still a good game.
I love that both these games exist, and I definitely think they are both worth your time.
Yeah, that seems in line with what you'd expect. Regardless of what we may think of Anniversary in relation to the original, I am still glad it exists. I just wish it would have existed in such a way that it wasn't rushed and could include more. It still remains as one of my most memorable Tomb Raider experiences and one of my most played games as a teen. I think I actually have more nostalgia for Anniversary than the original in that regard. And yet, not even that bias can overshadow the excellent parts of the original that stand out and above to this day. But with that, thank you all for watching this exceedingly long review / analysis / retrospective of Tomb Raider 1 and Tomb Raider Anniversary. I hope this has been entertaining or informative, or perhaps both. I know fans are probably eager to represent their preferred game out of the two, so feel free to raise your agreements and disagreements in the comments. Just keep it civil. Anyway, that's it. Bye.
Alright, so thank you for playing through Tomb Raider Anniversary and listening to all of the director's commentary.
Yeah.
It's been actually moderately fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully you didn't mind listening to us yap on and you garnered some bit of information that you were actually interested in about the history of Tomb Raider and the remake. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks.